Good afternoon, everyone. Hope I'm audible to you all. Just somebody sent a message. When somebody sent a message through a comment that I'm audible, shall we proceed with? Good afternoon. Okay. Joyce, am I audible to you? Okay, if I'm audible, if you say yes, we'll go ahead with. Thank you. Okay. Okay. And now, in the afternoon session, in the morning session, we understood, the importance of literature and the role of Francis Bacon as an essayist, as a statesman, as a philosopher. We understood in a couple of his essays too. Now, in this session, I'm very happy to introduce you a new area of literature, that is romantic literature. And you have in your syllabus, I think this happens to be a course 4, 19th century English literature, 19th century literature, where there are 3 significant poets, outstanding poets of romantic literature in English. That is one among them, like among Wordsworth and Coleridge and John Keats. Today, I'll take up John Keats' poem that is Ode on a Grecian. And we all know that John Keats is such an outstanding poet of nature and the beauty of nature. Coming back to the entire paper, that is 19th century English literature. In that paper, I must tell you the basic, the aesthetics of that particular paper, the nuances of that paper, the representations of that 19th century English literature. In that paper, which you're going to study, we have many literary genres like poetry, novel and prose, and many other forms of literary text. But John Keats' Ode on a Grecian, it's an ode. As I told you in the morning, there are different types of poems like poetry, poems, lyric, ballad, ode, and epic. So among these forms of poetry, ode is also a kind of a poem. I must tell you what exactly the ode is. See, let me tell you, the ode is it's a lyric which tells a story. That means in all the odes, you can expect a certain story. So here in John Keats' Ode on a Grecian, you're going to expect to listen a story. The ode itself tells a story. I told you, a ode is a lyric. Lyric is a kind of a poem. It's a lyric which tells a story, and somebody is going to address on particular subject. I told you, it tells a story, and somebody could be the speaker. He's addressing a particular object. So what is the object here? The object itself is urn, U-R-N, urn. It's a Grecian urn. It's a Grecian urn, which is meant for art, A-R-T, art. So as I told you, ode is a lyric which tells a story, a dignified in theme, feeling, style, and tone. In ancient Greek, the ode which has been popularized during the Greek time, in the ancient Greece, it was sung by a number of people in public on some important occasion. So these kind of odes were sung in the importance of some event during the time of Greece. So somehow John Keats is influenced by this Greek, the art, the music, songs, ode in this particular poem. Because we know that Greek is a country which manifested the art of beauty, literature, and whatnot. You all have understood through history the greatness of Greek, and how literature and how art and other thing has been very significantly brought out. And coming back to this particular poem, that is Ode on a Grecian. I was telling you the purpose of this paper, that is a 19th century English literature, in particular with poetry. Poetry like Wordsworth, Coleridge, John Keats, and Shelley, and other poets. Romantic poets I'm talking about. So what is the purpose of introducing these poets? What is our main motto? The principle by introducing this 19th century English poetry and literature in particular with, is to make you listener, you student, to understand. Otherwise, to familiarize with the artistic and moral imagination and aesthetics of 19th century poetry. Look at the line, how is it? See, the purpose of introducing this 19th century poetry to the students is to familiarize the artistic and moral imagination. This is very, very important. There is an artistic and moral imagination. Because when you look at the John Keats poetry, he believes in a doctrine. He believes in a principle. Whatever the imagination seizes must be truth. So what happens? So John Keats, this particular area of literature, especially odes concerned, like we have Ode to Autumn, Ode to Nightingale, and Ode in a Gratian. So here, the main motto by introducing this poet to you people to understand the artistic and the moral imagination and the aesthetics of 19th century poetry. This is the first and foremost important object that you need to understand. And then to inspire and to nurture and develop a spiritual affinity with nature through poetry. This is an outstanding statement. As that to the introducing Keats poetry, 19th century poetry to you people is to inspire, nurture, and develop a spiritual affinity with nature through poetry. After all, the man can only associate himself with the nature, not to man, not to society. After all, when we need a kind of a solace, where do we go? We go to nature to relax ourselves. So he thinks that nature itself is the best harmony to a human being. Nature itself is the best harmony. That's the reason why today we call Wordsworth as a pantheist. The pantheist in the sense, the man who surrendered himself to the nature. For example, the man who thinks that nature itself is a best friend to another one. So he finds a kind of a solace in that. So the pantheism arose only through 19th century poets. So here, this 19th century poetry, especially John Keats and the Wordsworth, in particular to John Keats, to inspire and to nurture and develop a spiritual affinities with the nature through poetry. These are all very important. See, you read a poetry and you understand what exactly the poet talks about. You understand what actually the summary of, otherwise the story of Ode in a Gratian. But what is behind it? What's poetry is trying to suggest? And what is the purpose that universities like the Department of English has introduced poetry to make you aware of? These are the nuances. All nuances you should be very much aware of. What are the nuances that you should inspire and nurture and develop a spiritual affinity with nature through poetry? And the next point is to instill in the readers, like you listeners, to instill in the student a sense of compassionate aesthetics that promotes social conscience. This is very, very important. See, introducing the 19th century poets, 19th century poetry, especially John Keats or other poets, he is to instill the students a sense of compassionate aesthetics. When you look at the literature student, their attitude is entirely different from the students from other stream of studies. Could be like science or commerce or whatever. But literature, this is the one which instills a sense of compassionate that promotes a social conscience. The responsibility of a student towards the society. That is what the literature, inculcate or imbibe the spirit among the learners, among the students. Hope there is students, you are very much aware of all this. And the last important thing is that to familiarize the student with the representative text of the particular period. For example, when we talk about the 19th century literature and we remember the major significant writers. For example, we have the Wordsworth and Coleridge, John Keats, Mary Shelley, and after that, the next generations like Matthew Arnold, Robert Browning, Alfred Tennyson, and many other 19th century writers. So these are the the fundamental things, the dogma, the true doctrine that you people have to understand when you read a literature. Hope I gave you a little insight about this particular paper. There's a 19th century English literature. And let me get back to the text, the poem that we are going to study. So this session, I'll take up 2 poems, one from the John Keats Ode and a Gratian, another one, a metaphysical poem, a holy sonnet, a religious poem, that is Dead Be Not Proud by John Donne, I'll teach these two poems today in this session, and tomorrow I'll take up the further, like we have other narrative poetry, a drama, another very bigger text, which is a very, very, very representative text too. So now, come back to this. See, John Keats, he's a renowned poet of English Romantic movement. The Romantic movement which celebrates the man, the nature, and the god. The Romantic literature, it revolves around a man, nature, and the god. These are the three things that we come across in Romantic literature. And especially when it comes to John Keats' poetry, you understand how he glorifies the art. ಆ ಕಲೆ ಅಮರ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಈ ಒಂದು ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಅಕ್ಯುರೇಟ್ ನಿದರ್ಶನ. ಈ ಒಂದು ಗ್ರೇಷನನ್ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ದ ಓಡ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಗ್ರೇಷನನ್, ದಿಸ್ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಪೋಯಮ್, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್. It's an example to know that how the art is a permanent, whereas man is transient. Kale amara, manushya nashwara. Annodana, we are all bound to die, but whereas not the art. The ancient temples, things are all being still alive. I mean, still are glorified, and they're meant for eternal, immortal. But we human being, we bound to die. So these are the two contradictory things that poem always, this poem is juxtaposed with. The poem juxtaposed with the world of art and the world of man. So now, come back to this poem. So though he died at a very young age of 26. So John Keats, he died at the age of 26. He died very early. But the kind of remarks, the kind of contribution, the literary merits and literary achievement that he has left to the world of English literature, it is enormous. Okay, this is one thing you should understand. And he was considered to be one of the great romantic poets. During his brief life, he created some of the best known and enduring poetries, known especially for his love for the country and sensual description. What is this sensual description? Sensual description in the sense, like we say in Kannada, that touches to the feelings or emotions of everyone. They're so appealing in terms of its approach. This one thing. And then, and coming back to his other writings, craftsmanships talking about, Keats is appreciated for his seriousness and thoughtfulness. There's a very seriousness and a very thought-provoking and thoughtfulness, style that the poet had. So, and as I told you, he is known for his artistic merits. So these are the things that you should always keep in mind. And gradually, I must tell you one thing that, see, Keats' poetry, they capture the contraries such as sorrow and joy. This is a major distinction, the major principle or distinctions of John Keats' poetry. What is that? His poetry, they capture, the kind of a contraries. Contraries ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಎರಡೆರಡು ವಿರುದ್ಧವಾದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯಗಳನ್ನ this poem talks about, like sorrow and death. ಈ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, sorrow and death, and beauty and decay, and time and eternity, and art and nature. So these are the contraries which always juxtapose in the writings of John Keats. I repeat, what are the juxtapose? What are the contraries that we come across in Ode and Aggression and by John Keats? That is, one is the sorrow and joy, and the beauty and the decay. And beauty is not at all, beauty is meant for decay, isn't it? It's not for eternal. And then time and eternity, and art and nature. And then John Keats is famous for his Ode to Nightingale, Ode to Gratian, and Ode to Autumn. He admired life in all its facets and explored the true substance of human life. And this is the very, very important. What is that? And John Keats, he admired life in all its facets and explores the true substance of human life. And he connects the concepts such as beauty, imagination, truth, to the excellent of art. This you should remember. Now, further, I'll just get into the analysis of the poem. So far, I just described you the introductory remarks about the entire poem and the poet. And now, let us get into the poem. So here, this thing is very important. We identify that how the poem celebrates the manifestations of the artistic achievement. This is very important. So how the poem celebrates the manifestations of artistic achievement, this is a very, very important in this poem. And I told you, when it is an ode, there will be somebody like a speaker, he suddenly addresses to a particular object. So who is the speaker here? The speaker himself is a poet. The poet he addresses to a on, you or an on, which means, in Kannada we say, Kadasa anta kariತೀವಿ. It was kept in the Greek Museum. I must tell you, once John Keats had been to a Greek Museum, and he saw that this beautiful urn, which has contained certain pictures in it. ಆ ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅರ್ನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲವು ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್ಸ್ ಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಕಾರವಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. So there he saw some carvings on the outlayer of urn, and he was amazed and by the beauties of the urn. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಕೆಲವು ಚಿತ್ರಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡಿ he was completely fascinated and amazed, and he inspired from the Greek museum's urn, and he writes his poetry. Now the poem starts with a direct address to the urn. How does the poem start? It starts with a direct address to the urn. So how does it start? Though still unravis bride of quietness. 1 minute. So the poem starts like this. Though still unravis bride of quietness, though foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian, who can't thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than a rhyme. Probably you might have gone through this poem. You might have referred this poem. As of now, you might have this poem with you people. And how the poem begins with, he begins like this. Though still unravis bride of quietness. So the though means here, it's you. The speaker is addressing on as you. You, though still unravis bride of quietness. He compares this on to a bride who is going to get married. Though still unravis bride of quietness. That means that you're not at all married. You're the on is compared to a bride of quietness, who still possess a virginity. He calls this urn, he compares the urn to a virgin woman. That means though still unravished bride of quietness. You're not ravished. Andre, you're not been destroyed. You still possess your virginity. You're so sacred. You're so, you're still, kind of a religious sanctity that you still possess. So, though still unravished bride of quietness. Here, the urn is not ravished by the ravages of time. The poet challenges that the time is not at all a destroyer. Time cannot, take away your beauty. Time will never diminish your beauty. Time will never diminish your beauty, and time cannot take away your beauty. And in the time, it's still a preserver. Kala ninana preserve ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. The time is preserved you. Oh, Grecianon, look at you. You are like a bride of quietness. And you still have your virginity, purity, and you're still good. So here the urn is not ravished by the ravages of time. It is still preserves quietness and silence of art. The art, the beauty, the urn beauty, it is still preserved by the time. So time is a preserver, not the destroyer, according to John Keats. John Keats is expressing his beauty. Its beauty. So here in the first stanza, the words quietness and the silence, the subject suggests that the time, the great destroyer, is passive. What we call the time is a great destroyer, he is passive here, and he fosters, whereas the time, it still preserves you. Your fosters andre rakshisodu, preserving with the tender care. And then the beauties of the urn. So here the virgin beauty of the urn is suggested by the phrase unravished bride of quietness. I told you, unravished in the sense not being destroyed. You still possess your chastity. This is the term that he refers. So further, the poet calls the urn as a sylvan historian. Further, the poet called this urn as a sylvan historian. The first he called it as though still unravished bride of quietness. Though, thou, though andre neenu antale. It's referred to you in a Old English. So he calls the urn as a bride of quietness, and now he's calling the urn as calls as a sylvan historian. As it expresses a flowery tale forever more sweetly than a rhyme, which expresses the warmth of life through the concrete figures depicted on the urn. And he called that you still possess the warmth of life. But this is a very important term. Why does he call the urn as a sylvan historian? What is it? What does it mean by Sylvan historian? I must tell you this. And here, the Sylvan historian, please you take down possible. Sylvan historian meant it represents the woodland scene. There are certain descriptions. I told you it's a Grecian on. The Grecian on captures some pictures, the pictures, and he calls it as a Sylvan historian because you can see some woodland, the kind of a scene picture over there. The urn is a historian because it also tells a story. Historian in the sense the man who tells the history, isn't it? So you're a Sylvan historian. So Sylvan suggests that the pastoral existence, pastoral in the sense like the folk life, the ಜನರ ಜೀವನದ ಚಿತ್ರಣ, the village, the folk, and the sceneries, and the wood, the trees. This kind of pastoral, the pastoral. So Sylvan talks about the pastoral existence depicted as happily and in the scene. So he calls that, oh, though unwrap is bride of quietness, and you are a Sylvan historian. That means you have been telling a wonderful story. You're a historian. For example, I came to Greek Museum, I saw you the urn, and you're telling me as a historian, look at the beauties of the urn. So this is how the poem begins with. And gradually, and the further, how does the poem go ahead? See, and then the talks about intent. Okay, a flowery tale more sweetly than a rhyme. So there is a wonderful romantic description. And then, what leaf fringe legend haunts about thy shape. He glorifies the shape of the Grecian urn. And, and he talks about intent or a dales of Arcady. He uses two terms. ಒಂದೇನಪ್ಪ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ಟೆಂಪ್ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಪದ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಈ ಡೇಲ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಆರ್ಕಿಡಿ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಪದ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬರ್ತಾನೆ. In this first stanza, probably if you have the text, you can refer it. So what does it mean by in the temp or arcady? So in the both places, we realized by the Greek and Roman poets for their beauty. Why the poet he brings the temp or dale of arcady in the sense, because these are the two places. Which are the places? That is, the both the temp and arcady. It's the places where idolized by the Greek and Roman poets for the beauty, and he compares the urn to the Roman, the poets for the beauty and all that. So here and as association with the Apollo, and is a symbol of rural beauty. Arcady is a momentous district of Greece, associated in poetry. So this poetry and the poets, they're all signified, they're all glorified in a Greek country, a place called Arcady. So here he compared this urn to that places, the Greek places. So how you people have been manifesting the original, the true artistic values of art. So this is what we can see there. And gradually, he talks about certain, pictures. What men gods are these? ಆ ಒಂದು ಆನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನು ಕೆಲವು ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್ಸ್ ಗಳಿದೆ. There are other different pictures, and he calls them, what men or gods are these? Who are these people here? The poet is asking to the An, who are these people are here? What maidens sloth? Why they're so shy? There are some youth people, there are young men, women, and all are there. The pictures have been called over there, and he said that why these men are loth? Why they're so shy? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? They wanted to see the artist ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಆ ಚಿತ್ರಗಳನ್ನ ಬಿಡಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, he has given a life to the beauties of the art, beauties of the pictures, or the characters are there, the young men and the women. What struggle to escape? What pipes and trembles with what wild ecstasy? Who is this piper? And there is another picture. There is a piper who flutes some music. I'm talking about the different pictures on the art. He talks about the kind of land places, the folk places, and he talks about temp and arcady, and he talks about the men and women, and he's talking about a piper. He says that what wild ecstasy. Look at that, how beautiful it is. Frenzied joy we come across through the musical instrument. The moment the piper flutes some music, you can feel it, because it's just a picture. Isn't it? That's the reason I told you the kind of a sensual imagination, a sensual beauty that we can get when we listen, when we read his poetry. through the imagination. Because as I told you, John Keats, he believes in a doctrine, whatever the imagination sees must be truth. ಕಲ್ಪನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವನು ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಸುಂದರವಾಗಿ ಆ ಒಂದು ಫ್ಲೂಟ್ ಅನ್ನು ನುಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ, ಅವ ಪೈಪರ್ ಅಂತ ಅವನು ಇಮ್ಯಾಜಿನೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾನೆ. ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ವೈಲ್ಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟಸಿ ಹಿಯರ್. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter therefore. And further, referring to the piper, he tells a word. He tells a particular line. What is that? Heard melodies are sweet. The song that we listen are sweet. Because we may put our comment, yes, the song is good or bad. But those unheard, the songs which are not been heardful, for example, our piper, the piper who flutes music through this on, because he looks as if he's singing a song, or if he's piper. So what happened here, we can feel this kind of a song only through our imagination, how beautifully he's been composing a song in that way. So what happened? So heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. You can listen a song and you can put forth your comment and we forget then and there. But now what happens? And here this song is can't be heard, because you can only imagine that how well the piper is fluting the music, isn't it? And then he said, those unheard are sweeter. So heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. If I tell it in Kannada, there is one, I just made a little translation. Keluva nada madura, keladiruva nada maduratita anodara. See, the song that we listen, they are so sweet. But the song, we just only can imagine how beautiful it can be. That's maduratita, sweeter. So in that way, the poet is, he brings the beauties of the urn to everyone's sensual ear. That we can come across here. And now here he says that how the platonic love can be retained. ಒಂದು ಆದರ್ಶ ಪ್ರೀತಿನ ಹೇಗೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಅರ್ನ್ ರಿಟರ್ನ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಸಹಿತ ಕೊಡ್ತಾನೆ. The poet gives an example, an example by describing a particular instances to glorify the platonic love. And there is no physical union, there is no love, there is no sex. It is just celebrates the platonic love. What is that line? I must tell you now. The line is this. So this is the line. What is that? Fair youth beneath the trees, thou canst not live. Am I audible to you people? Some of you said it's not, I can't hear you properly. Am I audible now? Is my voice is audible? Can you just put a comment in the public chat? Will you put a comment that am I audible to you people? Is my voice is audible? Can anyone say that? Is my voice is audible? Okay. And what happened? So he says that the fair youth beneath the trees, the can't not live. Thy song nor ever be can't trees be bare. So what he brings two important thing is that, so the tree, the next picture is a tree. Yes, audible. So he says that the fair youth beneath the trees, there are two lovers, the beneath the trees. There is I'm telling that there are two lovers, and neighbor beside that there is one tree. So beside the trees, these two lovers are there. And what does he express? Thou canst not live. And they cannot be separated, because it is an urn. This is a picture which has made them together, isn't it? They bring them together. And thy song nor ever can those tree bear. And the leaves which are there in the trees will never shed down, will never fall down. The leaves which are there in the urn, it is always everlasting green, because the color has been painted in the urn. The leaves which are there, wonderful that you can hear me. Yes, yes, I just I increase my voice. So I was describing this line: fair youth beneath the trees, thou canst not live. Thy song nor ever can those tree be bare. So here he says that there are two lovers beneath the trees, and here the trees is always capture the true green. The color will never be faded. It retains the same it retains the same color, and the trees will never be bare. And then bold lover never ever can't thou kiss. So here the two lovers, they're so eager to kiss one another, but they cannot, because because here they're completely motionless. They cannot move one another. They're almost so eager to kiss one another, but they cannot because they are just a picture. That means how the urn, it is still celebrating the manifestations of platonic love. This is one thing. And haste not thy bliss, forever will thou love, and she be fair. So because of these kind of things, oh on, you always will be there. You will always be fair, and you will never ever destroy your beauty. You still contains your the kind of a virginity or your the values. Oh, happy, happy boughs that can't shed your leaves. Now he's talking about the boughs that twigs in a tree. A twigs early, they will never shed their leaves. The leaves which are there in the arm tree will never fall down the leaves. They're always, nor ever bid the spring adieu. Even after spring goes, the leaves are always evergreen. See how the poet is, glorifying the beauties of the arm. He's saying that, the kind of things that even the spring adieu, even after spring goes, and you will be so you will celebrate your beauty. It's still a spring for this urn. For the urn is not captured by any kind of season, the winter, summer, whatever. So always the urn, it celebrates the true artistic beauty. And this is one thing. And after that, he goes on describing further, and forever piping song, forever new, more happy, happy, and forever warm still they enjoyed, forever panting, forever young, and you'll be always young. You always carry your youth and tenderness. That's what the poet is glorifying. That means time is not a destroyer. Time will never diminish the beauties of the art. Generation after generation, generation after generation, the urn which captured the values of life. And the leaf arts are high, sorrowful, and cloyed, the burning forehead and a parching trunk. And here, so here we can understand how the urn, which completely away from this concept called decay, generation, degeneration, degeneration ugly, or the kind of decay ugly. So we will never come across in this. The urn will never meet at all, and it will capture the true essence of him. And after that, another important concept, important paragraph here, you have to understand that who are these coming to sacrifice? If you look at the stanza of 4, you will understand this concept. Who are these coming to sacrifice? There are people who see. Some of you sent a message like, "Sir, please tell whether this class will be available in the YouTube later because my friends don't have network. Can't they get it later? Please answer this." No, when I'm teaching, you cannot put such kind of questions. Okay, please, you avoid. Not to put such kind of questions. You just listen, and probably in further they may upload in the YouTube. You listen it, but as of now, you just listen carefully. Not such a lengthy questions. Okay. And now there's a personal problems, but you need to maintain the kind of internet facility high, and which you can able to listen, connect so easily, and not to create any kind of hassles or disturbances. So now, who is coming to sacrifice? To what green altar, oh mysterious priest? So there is in the stanza 4, you understand there are some there are a group of people who coming to sacrifice Ifer. An Ifer, it's a cow. The group of people, along with the priest, they are carrying this Ifer to sacrifice. And what is the remarks of John Keats? How does he put his opinion here? Let us see that. So he says that who are these coming to sacrifice? He look, for example, he looks at the urn. He looks at the urn so closer, and he says that who are these people? Because I told you that he had been to a Greek museum once, and he's talking about the pictures which are depicted on the urn. Urn mele kettiruvanತಹ ಕೆಲವು ಚಿತ್ರಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕವಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. Okay, that you should keep in your mind. And then, who are these coming to sacrifice? To what green altar? And the Ifer has been decorated with a green. How mysterious priest! So here the priest is appearing as a mysterious person. He's a very mysterious priest. Leads thou that the Ifer lowing at the skies, and you're being carrying this Ifer towards eternity, towards some place, probably could be sacrificed. And all are silken flanks with a garland dress. And how are you carrying this Ifer? Ifer is a cow, as I told you. So you are going to sacrifice with decorating silken and green altar and everything. And then what happens? And what little town by river or a seashore? And on the urn, if the poet can see that there is a river, there is a small town, there is a river, there is a seashore, and everything. They have been carrying this Ifer toward that place. And then, what little town by river or a seashore, or mountain built with a peaceful citadel? So what a peaceful, the mountainside, a lot of peacefulness and so tranquil kind of a things has been developed there. Is emptied of this fog, this pious morning. And this seems to be a very pious morning. For me, it seems to be like a very religious morning. What's going to happen? Why are people going to sacrifice this urn? Whether this urn will be sacrificed or whether this urn will be luckier, will that be escaped? Yes, the Ifer which is there here, it will be escaped from the death because it is in the art. ಕಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಈ ಹಸು ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, the Ifer ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, it can't be sacrificed. The priest cannot sacrifice it. It is escape from the death. How? It's in the art form. That's it. Who can glorify such things? Only John Keats can glorify that. I and you can't glorify such a things. Look at that. The bird which is there in the picture, it's always everlasting. It will never, meet the death. Do we say so that? Probably after reading John Keats this poem, we may feel so. But that kind of idea will never come to our mind. But what happened? John Keats, he says that, yes, this Ifer, it is the luckiest. And is emptied of this fog this first morning, and little town by streets for evermore will silent be and not a soul to tell, though why thou art desolate ever return. I can say that the craftsman, who has carved will never return. I know he will never return, but whereas this place, it seems to be very desolate, and here, and you can feel the kind of a stillness in the beauty. And the poet, he says that. And the last paragraph, he talks about that. Oh, Attic shape. He used the word, oh, Attic shape. Attic, it is in Attica, was a great center of Greek art and sculpture. So I told you it's a Grecian urn. Greek ದೇಶದ ಒಂದು urn ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವನು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾನೆ. In the last paragraph, the poet says that, oh, Attic shape ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ. What he says so? He says that Athens in Attica, there is a place called Athens in Attica, was a great center for Greek art and sculpture. There is a place for Greek art and culture. For this, he calls as a great, you are a Attic shape ಅಂತ ಕರೀತಾನೆ. And he calls it as Attic shape. In the beginning, he calls you a, Andravi's bride of quietness. And further, he calls you a Sylvan historian. And, he calls it by one other name. He's giving a lot of personifications here. Oh, Attic shape, fair attitude. Look at that. There is a completely a fair attitude. I can see a lot of good things are going to happen here. And with the bread, B-R-E-D-E, that means you have been embroidered with a grass, the beauty. I can understand how eternal the beauty that you possess. Of marble men and maidens overwrought. There are men are there, maidens are there. Oh, with forest branches and the trodden weed. The green grass and everything is there. And thou silent form that teases out of thought, as doth eternity cold pastoral. So now he calls the urn as a cold pastoral. Why does he say cold pastoral? Because this is very important. He calls the urn as a cold pastoral because the cold which represents death. Cold which represents death, and whereas pastoral represents the life. Pastoral and the life antali, the cold in the sense refer to the death. So death in life another. You are died. You are not at all alive. Oh, you are dead completely. But still, I can see there is a life in it. See, life and death is different. Death in life is different. Life and death in the sense like the one who juggle with a lot of mundane problems in his life. The life itself is in a death. But whereas here, the cold pastoral, cold represents the death, and the pastoral represents the life. So the on, you are died, but you still possess the life. So he calls the on as a cold pastoral. And he says that when old age shall this generation waste, when the generation after generation passes, okay, and those shall remain in the midst of other old. Generation after generation, people may die, but you'll always remain forever. And he says that, beauty is truth, truth beauty. Wherever there is a beauty, there is a truth. Wherever there is a truth, there is a beauty. We have in Indian concept that is Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. You listen that. Satyam, Sundaram, Shivam. Satyam, Shivam is a God. Everything, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. All these three concepts, they carry the essence of beauty, the God, because everything has been created by the God. So what happens? Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. That all we need to understand in the life. So what does it mean? He tells in the fragment of his poem, he says that, the generation after generation passes. Eventually he asserts that generations after generation passes, but the eternal quality of the urn remains forever new. Even after 40 decades or 10 decades, whenever, if you come and look at that, the Greek museum, this urn will have the same beauty. Hence, throughout the poem, the poet throws the light and the permanence of art and transient of human life. So I told you, everything is bound to die. He gives a lot of juxtapose. For example, in the actual life, the Eifer would have been sacrificed. A Hasuna, they would have slaughtered. They would have killed it. But it was safe completely in the art. And whereas in the true lovers, they would have kissed each other. Their love become lust. Only the pavitravada priti, the platonic love is not able to possible had they met like in the actual life. So one after another, the poet, he brings the comparison between the actual life and the idealized world. The idealized world, in the sense, the world which has been captured in the urn, the actual world, our day-to-day's world. So the John Keats, he gives a comparison between these two, actual life and idealized life. And then he says that throughout the poem, the poet throws the light and the permanence of art and the transience of human life. Transience in the sense, one who bound to die, one will die, with a vivid pictures on it. See, when evidently, Ode and Aggression deals with the message of the how art is permanent and man is transient once again. So, dear learners, so far I just explained an overview on John Keats' poem Ode and Aggression. I hope you somehow you were able to understand the poem, and you read the poem again and again, and we have given you the study materials, and you understand. Or some of you said life and death. Absolutely, that's true. And now, yes, I'll do one thing. Now I'm going to take up another very small poem by John Donne. That is, Death Be Not Proud. A very important poem. It is a metaphysical poem. I'll teach you this. Then exam point of view, you student, you can just talk to me over phone. Otherwise, you can come in person. You can always talk to me over phone. Okay, Amulya, and you have been saying a nice class. Thank you very much. And let me take up another poem. It's a very small poem. You might have read this poem. That is Death Be Not Proud by John Donne. Let me tell you something about John Donne. He's a metaphysical poet. Okay, he's a metaphysical poet. And, that means they come across the concept called the brevity, the economy of a language, using hyperbole and exaggeration, far-fetched imageries, metaphors, similes. These kind of a personifications. Figurative language is quite common in metaphysical poems. The terms itself, metaphysical, which transcends from some beyond human life. Prapanchikavada life in a bit beyond could be like Adhyatmika, otherwise could be like something, a metaphysical notion, the kind of a life which we only come across through exaggerations, the kind of a metaphysical life, metaphysical issues that we come across in this poem. See, this poem is called as a sonnet. Death Be Not Proud, it's a metaphysical poem. It's called as a sonnet, and it is considered a holy sonnet. Because holy sonnets, they deal with some sorts of, the religious sentiments, the religious issues. So in the same way, this poem talks about. So let let me give you an overview about this poem. Death Be Not Proud is always, as it begins it in a dramatic manner. The poem begins in a dramatic manner. How does it begin? Kind of a sudden surprises. This is one of the features of romantic, metaphysical poems. Begin with a dramatic manner, sudden surprises. He takes a very unconventional stand and openly dismisses the vain claim of death as a destroyer. The notion death is a destroyer. Earlier poem we come across, time is a destroyer. He will never be a destroyer. Time will never be a destroyer. Here, John Donne says that death will never be a destroyer. And he proceeds to prove his point. How does he prove? Let's see him further. Okay, and he say that he attacks the death, which is called as a very mighty and the dreadful. It seems somebody calls death is a mighty and the dreadful. Oh, yeppa. Look at the death. He's so powerful. He's so mighty. He's so dreadful, and he will destroy us. But according to the poet, the death is something zero, and he proves with certain substantial evidence. I'll tell you which are the evidences further. So I told you the poem written in a sonnet form, and come back to this poem. Look at that. Death be not be proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful. The poet is very much uncertain about his viewpoints on the death. Of course, he's completely eradicating, completely rejecting the very notion of dreadful and the mightier. Death be not proud. Oh, death, though, don't be so proud. Don't so have this kind of conceit notion. Don't be so think that you're so arrogant or you're a dreadful and destroyer. Some have called thee a mighty and the dreadful. I think some people have called you as a mighty. You're so powerful. You're something dreadful. For thou art not so. Probably they may not know you. They have not even comprehend your level. For the poet, death is nothing. It is something, the kind of nihilistic views. For those whom thou think or overthrow something, there are people, death will kill you. That means though dost overthrow, that means somebody will kill you. Somebody will kill you. But from rest and sleep, which by their pictures be. For example, I am taking rest. I am sleeping on the bed. I also appear like a death. No, in Kannada we say that he almost looking like the one who died. Look at in deep sleep. He appears like the one who died. Isn't it? So when a man who sleeps, when the man is sleeps, he also appears like a dead person. Okay, and but thy pictures be much pleasure, then from thee much more must flow. But I think this is not what actually I meant for. The visibility talking about the man who sleeps, he also appear like the one who died. But what? What actually? How is he going to prove that you are not at all was so powerful? Sooner our best men with thee do go. All people, whether the rich or a poor, whether the distinguished or whether the minor, everybody bound to die. Sooner or later, everybody they bound to die. Our best men, every best man. For example, if somebody is the best, and do you think he's an eternal? Do you think he's immortal? He cannot release from the shackles of the death. Nobody can be, escape from the death. Rest of the bones and the soul delivers. For example, when the moment the body dies, the soul delivers from the body. For which he is a death for the soul. Adre soul ge savidya, dehakke savide. Adre alliruva on the soul ge savidya. So how death you will be a dreadful and the mightier. Are you dreadful and the mightier? It's only the bones which it is a bone and the soul delivers. Death only for the body. The body dies, but not for the soul. Thou art slave to fate. You are a slave to fate. I think you are completely surrender yourself to the fate. Chance kings and desperate men with poison. See, everybody have to die. Kings die, men die, and probably even when they take a poison, they also kill themselves. Adrinda death is superior ankolakagutta. It's a very trivial. I think you are very trivial. A very trivial anta. He counterattacked the poet. People die when they take even a poison. And even when the soldiers, they have to fight in the war, they also have to die, and they don't worry for the death. Do you think they worry for the death? They are beginning itself, they have just made sure that to just die for the nation's sake. So when the person takes a poison, when the soldier who goes to the war, and when the person who fell sick, see, these are the very important. I think that the true substance of this John Keats poem, the true substance of this poem lies on these statements. What are that? One is that the one who this is the one, the poison, the war, and the sickness. For example, the one who takes a poison will also die, and one who goes to the war, he will also die, and one who falls sick, he will also die. If that is the case, how do we call death as a superior? Death is a the kind of a mightier? I don't think so. That's what the poet says. And poppies are charms. For example, the sea of poppies. When you take the poppies, which gives you intoxication. If you consume a poppies and that gives you intoxication, and you sleep on the bed, and then also you appear like a dead body, the one who died. So it is only, death is only for the physical. Death is only for the body, but not for the soul. Soul is always eternal. That's what we understood. That's what the poet is, he defends his argument. Can make us sleep as well. When you take a poppies, when you take a charms, can make us sleep as well. And better than the stroke. Why? Well, though then, one short sleep past. Once we sleep, we wake eternally. This is a very famous and outstanding line, and from the poet. How does he say that? See, he says that death is not only a short of sleep. When it occurred to us, we sleep for some time. That's it. When the death comes, we just sleep for some time. But whereas the soul delivers from the body, which is not at all visible, and there is no death for the soul. It is eternal. But after that, we wake forever and attain a state of immortality. That is what the poet's argument is all about. See, what does he say? So, when it occurs to us, when the death occurs to us, we sleep for some times. We only sleep for some times. And what happened? But after that, we wake for even more and attain a state of immortality. See, the attainment of immortality is very important. That's what the poet is saying that. And then, in that state of immortality, death becomes ineffective. When the soul has become immortal, and death becomes ineffective. It becomes a non-existence if it is itself had died. Death, thou shalt die anta ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ. Death, thou shalt die, and once short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die, and you are not at all. You are no more, and yourself will die. When the body dies, the soul delivers from the body. So by giving this kind of an economy of a language, by giving this kind of a comparisons, the John Keats, he glorifies, John Donne, he glorifies the immortality, and he says that death thou shalt die, and it's immortal. It become non-existence. Body become non-existence, as if it is had died. Actually, death leads to an eternal life, which can be attained to after man has crossed the boundaries of worldly life and passed to the stage of death. It may be said that the death is stepping stone to eternity and immortality. This is the last line. You should, you can just take down that. He said that it may be said that death is a stepping stone to eternity and immortality. Death is a stepping stone to eternity and immortality. So you should never repent. You should not repent that death will take away. So this is an outstanding poem, and the way John Keats is glorifies the death as not as a superior or a dreadful, and death, you're nothing. You're not at all affecting anyone. So this is the one thing. And dear students, I repeat, the entire capsule summary of the entire text, entire poem, that death be not proud in this form. Let me repeat that line. The poet, he's as I told you, he began by saying that death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and the dreadful. You're not that. That's what he says that. And then he gradually says that, the poet further says to death that rest and sleep bear. Regarding it as a source of pleasure, the best men embrace death and go with it so as to get physical rest. It is a physical rest. Death is a physical rest, or comfort for the body throughout it. Also, the rest to the deliverance of the soul from the confinement in the body. So it seems that the soul has been confined in the body. See the wonderful line. It's saying the soul has been confined in the body, but when we died, the soul delivers and it releases from the body, and it has become immortal and the eternal. And the further stanza, as I explained to people, that the poet remarks to death that it is a slave to fate. The second stanza, he says that it is a death is a slave to the fate. And for example, chances, kings and desperate men depends on them for its occurrences. Everybody have to die. Even king is not he's not released from these shackles of the death. Even king is also die. Everybody will die. Any of these things may cause to death to happen. So death lies with the poison, war and the sickness, as I told you. And or it can more only with the help of these things. So far as to rest giving to the sleep concerned, it is a momentary death. He says that when the person dies, it is just a momentary death. It is just a momentary death, and it is not a complete ending to it. Because when we died, we wake eternally. That is an important line. Remember that he says that one short sleep past, we wake eternally. Death andre, it is just a short sleep past, but we wake eternally. We become eternal, and death shall be no more. This is a wonderful line. See, death shall be no more. We outrightly reject the notion of death, that you're nothing. Thou shalt die. You will die, because death, you are nothing. But what about the soul? So I must tell you, listener, readers, dear learners, you understand the entire poem. It celebrates the nuances, or it celebrates the permanence of soul. The soul, there is no death for the soul. Soul is eternal, which we haven't seen at all. It's an abstract form. It's an infinitive form. It's an immortal, but nobody has to worry for the death. So here, John Keats, in a way, is giving a reminder that those people worry to die. I mean, not worry to die. Those who think that the death is such a dreadful and mighty and dreadful, we should not have to be worried, because none of us is permanent in the world. When the God summons, everybody, a monarch must obey. I think you might have remember this line. When God summons, when the monarch must obey. Devaru karadaga ba monarch ba raja kuda tale bagbeku. Haudu nan bartini, take me away anta. So even the God is also, even the monarch, the king, nobody cannot release from the shackles of the death. And dear learners, okay, and so far I have taught you one romantic poem, one metaphysical poem. In the romantic poem, you understood how the poet he celebrated the manifestations of artistic beauty in ordinary Grecian. Whereas in the metaphysical poem, they're the different, entirely different entity, different sect of poems, different genre of poems. One is a metaphysical, where the poet uses a language, it's almost like a verbal language. He has been directing, has been giving a caution to the death, that not to think that you're a superior. Look at the language, look at the economy of a language, exaggeration, metaphysical conceits, hyperboles, comparisons, more even in metaphysical poems. Whereas in John Keats, the romantic poem, you understand there, more than these comparisons, we understand the two worlds. One is the actual world, another one idealized world. Actual world in the sense, like we are all, what we are enjoying. I mean, we are also bound to die. I mean, both the poems, in a way, they celebrate the concept of death and immortality. If the John Keats Grecian celebrates the immortality, here this poem also celebrates the immortality of the soul, isn't it? So that's the reason why I have taken this poem for the different poles, different directions and different themes, but somehow I had to give a link to it. Dear learners, hope certainly you understood the poems. And I want you to, I repeat that, please you read the text again and again, you understand more, because the way I look at a poem is entirely different from how we look at it. I think that's the only area of study there's a literature such that. Okay, and see, whenever you have certain doubts, and here we don't have the interaction mode. That is also one of the big problem. Here we don't have interaction mode, and what you can do, you can thank you. Sanjeev Rathod says that explanations and all that. Okay, thank you very much. Any further doubts which can't be solved through a text like this, and you can always talk to me between the time, official time, and I'll meet you tomorrow, people. Let us discuss either Dr. Foster's or Rep the Log tomorrow, and I wish you good luck and see you tomorrow. Another teacher is waiting for the session. Good luck to you.
attempted or I have not uh, tried to write an epic in the past. See, there are great influences on English prosody. One is Chaucer, the second one is Spenser, and the third one is again Shakespeare, and the fourth one is uh, John Milton. These are the four great people who had a kind of influence on English prosody. Coming to this text, as I told you, in the invocation itself, he seeks the blessings of uh, the muse and he starts to write. So, according to him, he is trying to write what? He is trying to write the first disobedience of man. And first disobedience of man, as he proclaims, he announces in the very first line that he wants to write on the first disobedience of man, whose mortal again and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into this world, isn't it? At the same time, also spoke about his initial seeking the blessings of muse, where he asks the muse to illumine what is low in him, and what is means he might lose this what enthusiasm or energy in the middle, because writing an epic requires what lot of energy. So he feels that for that he needs the help of muse. That is the reason why he says illumine what is low, rise and support. That to the height of this great argument, that to the height of great argument, I may I may assert the eternal providence, and justify the ways of God, and justify the ways of God to men. So this is the very intention. This is the very intention of John Milton in writing an epic like Paradise Lost. So he knows that he is taking up a risk job, very risky job, which is an impossible task. So it took almost 7 years to complete that, and he announces that in the very initial two paragraphs, that he knows, he's fully aware that he's going to try something and unachieved, something which has been not conquered or not achieved by any of his predecessors. So that is what you see in the initial two paragraphs. So coming into the next details, like moving further into the text, you can see the story opens with the fiery lake. As I told you, there lies Satan and his followers, his other angels, who are stunned, shocked. They are baffled. They are very much shocked. They had never expected that God would punish them in such a manner. They never thought that God would hurl them directly to heaven. So the story opens with the scene of the fiery lake, and in hell, in which lie Lucifer or Satan, who is shocked, and at the same time, you can see the legion of rebellious angels. Legion, Legion, legion of rebellious angels. They are fallen. So again, they are stunned, shocked, and that is the scene. That is the scene, and you can see the Lucifer and their followers. Again, as I told you, and his followers, they yielded to the primary sin. As I told you, there are seven deadly sins. Out of seven deadly sins, pride is considered as the primary sin. So they yielded. They were tempted. Because of that primary sin, that is out of seven deadly sins, that is pride. Because of that pride, because of the same pride, Satan tried to dethrone God, or Satan tried to what? Create war against his own. Satan tried to fight war against his own creator. His own creator. You know, God created Satan. At the same time, God also created other angels. God also created man and other creatures. So God is omnipotent, almighty. But Satan, on the other hand, even after knowing that he is also created by the same God, he, he is so tempted. At the same time, he yields to the primary sin, that is pride. He yields to that, and that is the reason why he tries to wage a war against his own creator, God. And in that battle fight, he fails. He miserably fails, and he was defeated by God in no time. In no time, and God hurls them directly to hell, and you know, look at this Satan. This is where critics say that Milton was with the devil's party. While wait, but Milton was like Milton was for Milton it was unavoidable because he wanted to prove that Satan was also equivalent when it comes to power. When it comes to he was very much matching when it comes to power and glory because Satan had the courage to defeat God. He attempted to defeat God. So in that way, like he did not want to, Milton did not want it. Like his intention was to, his intention was not to, God, again, God should not overshadow Satan. Satan should not be overshadowed by God. That is the reason why he creates Satan in such a manner, like the words that he uses for Satan, he makes the reader fall in love with the character called Satan. So what I mean to say is again, okay, look at this Satan. Look at the way he tries to defend. He tries to defend himself. Tries to defend himself. Satan's defiance, even in the moment of defeat, even in the moment of defeat, and humiliation. Defeat and humiliation. You should not forget that once he is defeated, he is humiliated. They say that it took almost 9 days for him to fall from heaven to hell. Okay, it took 9 days for him to fall from heaven to hell, and there, if he is fallen like he has fallen along with the other angels. He is stunned, shocked, humiliated at the same time, defeated. He is defeated, but at the same time, we should not forget that he had that indomitable spirit, like he had that extraordinary energy. You can say he is very enthusiastic, very courageous. Satan is in this epic. You can see that he says that in fact. Look at these lines from the text. In order to mobilize his defeated army of legion army or the angels, legion of rebellious angels or the defeated angels, he tries to mobilize them. He tries to boost their confidence in such a way. Look at these lines. These are the lines uh, which makes you feel that Satan had all those leadership qualities. He was the archangel, and he had all those leadership qualities. That is again, that is the reason why Milton again gives him such an image, like he is equivalent to God. Look at this word. He had all the, look at these lines. He had those leadership qualities. Uh, Again, these are the famous textual lines. Again, while speaking to Beelzebub, his lieutenant, Satan mobilizes tries to fill in a kind of confidence in those fallen angels, in the minds of those fallen angels. Look at these words. Look at these lines. What though the field be lost? What though the field be lost? All is not lost. We might have lost the battlefield. We might have lost the battlefield, but all is not lost. What though the field be lost? Field means battlefield. What though the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will. So, the unconquerable will. We have that unconquerable will and study of revenge. Revenge should be studied. It should be studied means continuous. You cannot give up the revenge. Like our revenge against God is study, it is continuous. We are not going to give it up. We are not going to give it up. The unconquerable will. We might have lost the battlefield, but we have that unconquerable willpower. Unconquerable willpower. God cannot conquer the willpower that we have. At the same time, the study of revenge, immortal hate. The immortal hate, that means hate that never dies. So that hatredness towards God that never dies, immortal hate, and courage never submit, and courage never to submit, and courage never to submit or yield. And what else is not to be overcome, that glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me. So his wrath or his might cannot extort the glory that I have. The glory that I have. Extort means what? To to take something forcefully, right? To take something forcefully, he cannot extort the unconquerable willpower or the glory that I have from just his wrath or might. So straight away, like look at this line. Like, it's not confidence building. He is trying to build the confidence that his angels his angels have already lost. He's trying to boost their energy or enthusiasm. Okay, so because at the time of discussion, he feels that some of the archangels feel that they should what make a treaty with the god, and they have to return back to heaven. They feel that they cannot fight a continuous war against the god. So most of the angels which have fallen from heaven to hell, they feel that they cannot continue the war with God, because God is omnipotent. But whereas Satan and few other angels feel that the continuous fight with the God and spoiling all his designs, all his creations, all his plans is the only thing that can be achievable. Means we may not fight God directly, we cannot fight God directly, but we can wage an indirect war with the God, an indirect war with the God. So they have a different ploy, different conspiracy, different plan. So they cannot wage a war against God directly. So they feel that they can, even though they cannot have a treaty with the God, they can wage an indirect war with the God. So Satan, again, as I told you, tries to recover from the confused state. Okay, confused state. There is confusion about the grand defeat. So defeat itself is grand, very much grand, and I feel that audio is not clear. That is what is audio. Again, is it audible? Can you hear my voice? I hope you can hear me. Fine. See, I just can't go into the technical details. If I press a particular button, I may miss this class. I don't know, like where I'm going wrong when it comes to this mic. Because most of the students had commented that like they can't hear me properly. So as I told you, like Satan is trying to recover here. He is trying to recover from the confused state. He feels that it's a grand defeat they had encountered with the god, and he raises his head from the burning lake. You know the way, the kind of image you see in the Milton gives a kind of image that you see, the rising image of Satan from the fiery lake. You know, even while writing Gadayuddha, Ranna makes Duryodhana. Ranna intentionally makes Duryodhana the hero of Gadayuddha. He was fully aware that Duryodhana had some best qualities compared to Kauravas. That is the reason while writing Gadayuddha, Ranna intentionally makes Duryodhana the hero. But here in John Milton's Paradise Lost, Milton's intention was to glorify glorify God, glorify the power, the strength of God. At the same time, he also wanted man to realize his weakness. That man is nothing when it comes to when it comes to Almighty, the God. When an archangel like Satan is defeated by God, man is nothing. So that means man should always be in the mercy of God. That is what Milton feels. That is what Milton feels. That is the reason why he wrote Paradise Lost for 12 volumes. But in order to give a kind of what? Momentum, a kind of momentum to make it more grand, to make it more appear more elusive, bigger one. Like you cannot make Satan a character of lesser stature. You cannot make Satan a character of lesser stature. As I told you already, he has to match God. He has to match God in everything. But whereas God stands for good, whereas Satan stands for evil, isn't it? So he stands for evil. So he becomes the emperor of hell, isn't it? He starts to rule hell, whereas God starts to rule heaven. Whereas heaven and hell stands in different opposite directions. So man is caught between. So man, if he does good, something good, he can always look towards moving towards, like he can always expect again a place in heaven. Whereas if he involves in all kind of mischievous act or again commits so many sins, it's again we are going to reach hell, isn't it? So in that way, like Satan recovering from the confused state, he is confused, he is stunned, he is shocked, baffled, but you can see the rising image of Satan from that fiery lake. The rising image of Satan, he raises his head from the fiery lake, burning lake, and he gathers his strength. He gathers his strength, okay, to rise. He gathers his strength to rise from the lake of fire, from the lake of fire, and you can see that uh, there standing at the same time. He also asked, he also asked his his other angels, his other fallen angels to arise, to awake, to arise, awake or be even fallen. That is what he says. Okay, awake, arise, or be even fallen. Awake, arise, or be even fallen. You should means he expects them to arise, awake. Really, if you can't awake, if you can't arise, be even fallen. Be even fallen means lie like that. Means if you don't lack the energy or courage to stand with me, to fight against the God, you lie like that. You lie in that burning lake like that. If you cannot come with me, you cannot fight a continuous war against God. You just lie like that. If you have the courage, if you have the energy, awake, arise, awake, arise, or be even fallen, or be even fallen. They all standing at once. They all standing at once is a kind of thunder. It creates a kind of thunder which was heard in the remotest land, in all in entire universe. Again, whatever the creatures which are created by God, they all feel the presence of Satan and his followers in hell. They all standing at once, their rising all at once was the sound of thunder heard in the remotest land. That is what I mean. That's a kind of image, a kind of stature that John Milton gives for Satan and his followers. They are not lesser warriors. They are not of lesser warriors. They are not of lesser strength, or not the lesser warriors. They are equivalent to God. And you can see that forthwith upright he rears from off the pool, and his mighty stature, then with the expanded wings, he steers his flight till on dry land he lies. Means he has a kind of wing, a huge two wings. He has wings, and with those wings he starts to fly. He starts to fly, and at the same time they have a kind of meeting. It's called as Parliament of Evil Spirits. It's called as Parliament of Evil Spirits. First, they engage in a kind of meeting. There, they discuss about the future plans. Satan discusses everything with his followers. So, what has to be done? So in that discussion, as I told you, there comes three advices from his followers. One is to wage the continuous war against God, to fight against him as they fought already, like they did in the past. The second suggestion is to compromise with the God, and the third suggestion is to wait, wait and watch, to wait and watch, and to spoil whatever that God, like whatever the plans that God has for in the future. So they have three plans. One is to fight the war against God as they did in the past. Second thing is to compromise with the God, and the third one is to spoil to spoil the future plans of God. God, and in that meeting, all of the most of the angels, majority of the angels, agree for the third plan, that they want to spoil the future plan, the designs of God. So whatever the designs that God has for world, for future, for universe, so that has to be spoiled. So they have got a specific plan. Now, so what happens there? Then with expanded wings, he steers his flight till on dry land he lights. Okay. The rebels must make the most of the dreadful place where they find themselves. So it's a dreadful place. It's a new place for the rebels, the rebellious spirits, angels. It's a dreadful place. It's a new place. They built their own palace there, which is called as Pandemonium, Pandemonium, Pandemonium. Pandemonium means capital of hell. They built their own palace, okay, again, which is called as the Pandemonium, the palace, the capital of hell, okay. There in that capital of hell, because we should not forget that they are all angels, and with no time, in no time, they built that Pandemonium, the capital of hell, and there they have a kind of meeting, a parliament of evil spirits. In that parliament of evil spirits, three plans. Again, they come up with the three plans, and out of the three plans, as I told you, the third plan was accepted. It gets the majority consent, approval, and they all think about the future plans of God. This is very, very important, this paragraph. So in that meeting, Beelzebub, the lieutenant of Satan, has got something. He has got a plan, a specific plan. So what kind of means, you can see that the kind of humiliation they have faced, the humiliation after the defeat. So somehow they have to revenge. Somehow they have to take revenge against the God. So means they cannot fight a war with God directly. So that is the reason. So you can see this again. What is the what kind of plan that Beelzebub puts forth before before the with the other angels, the fallen angels, the rebellious angels. So you see that there is a place. So this is the place. Beelzebub speaks about a particular place. So Garden of Eden. He speaks about the Garden of Eden, where God has already created a creature called man. Okay, that man is called as Adam. Okay, and there is a place, another world. He says that there is a place called another world, the happy seed, happy blissful seed of some new race called man, of some new race called man, about this time, to be created like us. So as God created us, so God has a plan to create another creature called man. Another creature called man. So where in another word, God has a specific plan. He wants to create a creature called man. In another word, okay, like He has created us, God wants to create another creature called man. In power and excellence, okay, to be created like us, though less in power and excellence. So they are like us, they are the creation of God. So God is planning to create like us, okay, a creature called man like us, but though less in excellence and power. So they lack that power or excellence. They are not like us. Like these angels are immortal creatures. They are all immortal creatures, whereas man is not immortal. Man is a mortal creature. But at the time of creation, man was also made as an immortal creature. As an immortal creature. ಮನುಷ್ಯನ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ಮಾಡಿದವರು ಕೂಡ ಮನುಷ್ಯನಿಗೆ ಸಾವಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಾನೆ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. But what happens here? So Beelzebub is fully aware that this creature called man is of less in power, and excellence. Okay, and excellence, but favored more of him who rules above. So, but favored more of him means the one who rules above favors a lot, means he loves the creature a lot because he has created the creature with lot of affection, love, and care. With lot of affection, love, and care. So he is loved by the one who rules above. Who rules above means God. God loves that creature called man. So we have got a better opportunity to spoil the designs of God. So what is that design? To spoil God's creation. What is that creation? The creation called man. Man. So don't search for page number, please. So this is, I'm giving the gist. I'm giving the gist of book 1, Paradise Lost. So the text called Paradise Lost by John Milton. So you have got book 1 for course in the paper called course 1, that is Joseph Bunyan. Okay, paper 1, course 1, book 1, Paradise Lost, book 1 by John Milton. Don't try to search for details. Okay, I'm giving you the textual lines. You can use those lines in the exam and defend your argument. I'll give you a few important questions, which again, if you read those questions, most of the questions that are asked on this particular text revolves around those 4 questions. Don't worry. Okay, and means they are the most important questions. You can take it down later on. As I told you, again, Beelzebub has got something. He has got a plan. He announces his plan before those, in front of those evil spirits, in the parliament of spirits. He announces his plans. So according to his plan, he knows, he is fully aware that God has created a creature called man in another world, but he is of lesser power and excellence than us, who are also created by God. But God loves them. God has got affection, love, and care, more affection, more care, more love towards this creature called man. So in power and excellence, but favored more of him who rules above. So look at these lines. Dither means from here on. Dither, it's an old English, like, okay, it's an old English. Dither, Thiepher. Dither means from here on. Dither, let us bend all our thoughts to learn what creatures there inhabit. Means from here on, let us invest all our time, energy, everything in knowing one thing. What is that? In knowing what kind of creatures they are. So we have to know their strengths and weaknesses. So then only we can spoil that creature or the creation of God. Here perhaps some advantageous act may be achieved by sudden onset, either will hellfire to waste his whole creation. By sudden onset, either EITHER, either will hellfire to waste his whole creation, means we will put the hell in fire. To spoil the creation of God. Means let us invest all our energy, strength, might, everything to spoil the creation of God. To waste his whole creation, or possess all as a whole, and drive as we were driven the funny inhabitants, or if not driven, seduce them to a party. See, they have got another plan also. They want to spoil God, again, man. At the same time, they expect God to drive man from heaven to hell, like they are driven from heaven to hell. Like the angels were driven by God from heaven to hell. So they want, they want man to be spoiled, and they want to change the position of man from heaven to hell. They want to spoil man. They want to bring man bring him down. From again, they want to spoil the confidence or the trust the God has got on man. So you should not forget, as I told in the morning, at the time of creation, God had advised Adam, Adam, the first ancestor of mankind, that is us, the first ancestors of mankind, that is Adam. According to Bible, Adam is our first ancestor, was being created by God, was created by God. God at the time of creation had advised Adam not to eat the apple from that forbidden tree. Forbidden tree means what? Tree of knowledge. Tree of knowledge. Adam means what? Adam was innocent. Adam means the first ancestor of human beings. Mankind was innocent at the time of creation. So with knowledge you get what? Information. With knowledge what? You get what? You get rid of ignorance, innocence. With knowledge what? With knowledge you cultivate. You cultivate what? You cultivate all kind of bad qualities and also good qualities, isn't it? Man is a rational being. Man is a logical thinking animal, isn't it? Man is a civilized being because man is knowledgeable being. Man is not. Man can think. Man can think and act. So because how can man think? Man can think only because of knowledge. Because man can develop knowledge through education, through learning, through education. You acquire knowledge, right? So knowledge is the forbidden tree. So knowledge is the forbidden tree. After eating that apple from that forbidden tree of called knowledge, so man loses his innocence. Man is no more an innocent creature. You know, Adam, when he was created along with Eve, he was created later on to give companionship to Adam. And you know what happens when they eat the apple from that forbidden tree? Their innocency is gone, and they feel shy to see their body nude. They want to cover their body with the leaves, with the ripened leaves, with the ripened green leaves, because they feel shy. When do you feel shy? When you what? When you get rid of that innocency. So children don't feel shy, isn't it? When they are born infants, they infants children, they don't feel shy at the time of, like, for 2 to 3 years they simply roam without clothes on the body, right? And again, everywhere at your home. So once they develop that knowledge, once they acquire that knowledge by learning, they feel that wearing clothes is very, very important, and they get rid of that shyness. The innocency is get ridden, once that innocency goes away, okay, ignorance or innocency, whatever you call, like once it is removed off, you feel shy, isn't it? You feel shy. So this is what happens to Adam and Eve. You all know Satan comes in the form of a serpent, and uh, before that, Satan enters the gates of hell. So when he enters the gates of hell, he sees both sin and death. Sin and death. Sin is the mother, death is the son of sin. They are jobless. They are jobless. They are waiting at the gates of hell. They don't know what to do. They are listless. Okay, they are spending their time without any job, without any work. And what happens there? As soon as he enters the gates of hell, Satan finds again sin and death, and sin could recognize Satan, but whereas death, the innocent son of sin, tries to defeat Satan with its level spear. It tries to attack Satan, but Satan was equivalent. You all know he's an archangel. He defeats death in no time and makes both sin and death his servants. He makes both sin and death his servants, and he in fact also tells sin and death that in future they'll get abundant work. Once he spoils the king, spoils the plan or the designs of God by giving that forbidden tree, from apple from that forbidden tree. So you'll be having abundant what work, abundant work. So uh, that's very very interesting aspect. At the same time, people also ask whether critics also ask whether it's a very very interesting theological point God, even after knowing that Satan is advancing, Satan is moving, Satan is going to spoil. God was fully aware. God was fully aware that Satan is going to spoil. Satan is going to spoil man, but still he allows Satan to spoil man. The reason is it's a grand debate. It's a grand debate. There's a lot of theological discussion or debate, okay, on this point of view. Why God, even after knowing that Satan is going to spoil man, allowed him to advance, allowed him to move further to spoil man, because God, at the time of creation, was fully aware that man is a rational creature, and man can differentiate between good and bad. But at the same time, God also is aware of the fact that there is no scope for evil or bad. If there is, again, there is no scope for good. There is no scope for good if there is no evil or bad present in this world, isn't it? If there is no evil or bad, if everyone becomes good, isn't it? If everyone becomes good, this world becomes a utopian society. Utopian society. So you can't expect most of the people, 90% of the people, we are all standing in queue to reach hell, as I told you in the morning. So we are not entitled to get the place in heaven, isn't it? So we are not entitled to get the place in heaven. So at the same time, you can see that they have got a plan. So according to that plan, so Beelzebub says that it is Satan who is capable of again doing all these mischievous acts. You can see that he in fact gets the approval from the remaining angels. So he asked the other angels, so who is the one who can take up this task of again spoiling man? So you can see that say the funny inhabitants, or if not drive, seduce them to our party. So Beelzebub even has a proposal to seduce again the creature called man, and to again to take man into confidence and to seduce them into their party, tempt them to their party. So they want to pull man to their side or party, that their own God may prove that their God may prove their foe. Their foe means God may, again, if you seduce man to our party, God may become a foe or enemy to man. So man will take our side, man will be of our party, and in future man will start hating God. So that is the plan that Beelzebub put forth before the Parliament of Evils. And with a repenting hand, again, again, the Creator, that is God, will abolish His own work. So they know that God, who is the Creator of man, will abolish His own work, His own creation, with a repenting hands. With a repenting hands means ಪಶ್ಚಾತ್ತಾಪದ ಕೈಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, with a repenting, regretting, okay, regretting hands, God will abolish His own creation called man, His own creation or His own work called man. So he above has the courage. So they all feel that only Satan is capable of achieving this task. So he above has he alone, sorry, he alone has the courage, he alone has the courage and the cunning needed for the purpose, So if you have a purpose, you have something, you have a purpose, a task, a particular goal, something to achieve, and for that purpose, you need what? Cunning. You need to develop, you need to have that cunning quality. At the same time, you need to be courageous. So Satan is courageous, at the same time cunning. So he can do anything. He can do anything so to spoil the designs of God. Okay, and So that's what happens in book one. Book one is not like book 1 to 4. You can see uh, the plans and the again advancement of say serpent. And in book four, in fact, it is in book four that Satan spoils man again Adam. In fact, he spoils Adam. He enters in the form of he enters the garden, that garden of Eden, and he sits down that on that forbidden tree in the form of serpent. ಒಂದು ಹಾವಿನ ಆಕಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ಕುತ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾನೆ Satan. He comes in the shape of a serpent, and there he sits on that forbidden tree, and he finds Eve alone. She is all alone, and Eve is moving here and there, and Eve can hear the hissing sound of the serpent, that is Satan. In fact, Satan calls Eve towards him with its melodious voice, and when she finds it amusing because it's a beast. Satan, serpent is a beast. It's a venomous animal, isn't it? But she finds it so curious. She feels it so amusing. Amusing. The reason is it's a snake. How can a snake can speak, can converse, can talk? So she is amused, shocked. At the same time, Satan says, I am able to speak. I am able to speak or talk with you because of eating that fruit from the tree, from this particular tree. So if you taste this tree, fruit, you will acquire so much of knowledge, so much of benefits. So, but by the time Adam reaches the Garden of Eden, he finds that Satan has already, sorry, he has already tasted, that forbidden fruit, and you can see that, and Adam is shocked to see Satan, Eve in that state, and he feels that whatever would be your future will be mine. Like whatever that you are going to undergo, I'll also follow your path. Like so he also tastes that forbidden fruit. Okay, he also eats that forbidden fruit, and what happens in that last volume, God sends his son. God sends his son to direct man, like our first ancestors Adam and Eve, towards her that is created by God. Like that is how like man lost the place again in paradise, and man became mortal being from at the time of creation. Man was an immortal being, was an immortal creature. There was nothing like death for us. Like we were not born to face death, but what happened after again Eve eating that forbidden fruit, like we are all again forced to face that. That's what the story tells about. So I expect you to follow the textual quotations wherever it is necessary. Whenever like you like, there are 4 to 5 important questions which are very important when it comes to dealing with this particular text. That is book one, particular Paradise Lost book one, particularly book one. So the first question that may prop up in the exam is bring out the features of Paradise Lost which entitles it to be called an epic. It entitles it to be called an epic. The simple direct question is consider Paradise Lost an epic. Consider Paradise Lost an epic. Discuss the epic features in Paradise Lost. Discuss the epic features or epic qualities. What are the epic qualities that you see in Paradise Lost? So epic qualities, as I told you, it's very important. Now again, it has got the lofty language. The language is lofty. The style is grand. He adopts the classical style, the grand style, lofty, and his style is grand, majestic and sonorous, very huge, majestic. Even the cost image. See, the characters move from heaven to hell. Okay, from heaven, earth to hell, and the story is not related to a particular character like Krishna, Rama, or Hanumanta. The story is very much related to the entire human race. It is connected to human race, mankind. So man is the hero. Mankind, entire human race. So it is not God or Satan who is the hero of Paradise Lost. It is man. The story is centered around again around man. Man is the hero, not God, uh, nor Satan, because God and Satan they have got the long-lasting fight. But it is man who is caught between heaven and hell, isn't it? So heaven and hell. So Manusha Trishanku Parasthiti irtane, Trishanku. So it all depends on the way, the kind of life you lead, isn't it? The language is lofty. The language that he adopts is lofty, sonorous, SONOURS, SONOROUS, sorry, SONOROUS, sonorous, majestic, okay, majestic, and the magnitude of again the magnitude of the scene is huge. It is in grand cosmic scale, COSMIC, cosmic scale. As I told you, the readers are made to move between heaven and hell, move between heaven and hell. Okay, again, he in a way takes a reader as a tourist guide. John Milton is like a tourist guide. He takes the readers from heaven to hell and hell to heaven. Okay, and like it is not a simple job to give the picturesque details of heaven and hell. So to give the exact details, because whoever has gone to paradise has not returned, to give the detailed information about paradise. So people in religious texts, the text, sacred texts of Hindu Puranas, or even in Bible in Christianity, and you have Jannat concept in Islam, isn't it? So we speak about heaven and hell, but nobody, whosoever has gone to both heaven and hell, they have not returned. They are not returned to her, and even if they are not, even if they have returned to her, they are not able to give the exact details of heaven and earth. Like exact this means how it resembles, what kind of image, like what kind of picture, the picturesque detail that Milton gives to both heaven and hell is simply superb. Like you cannot compare. So he makes the readers feel that he himself has gone as a tourist or a visitor to both heaven and hell. See, when he gives the picture of a fiery lake, okay, a panoramic picture of fiery lake, like a huge picture of fiery lake, you can imagine like a blind poet describing the background details of heaven and hell is simply outstanding. It is very difficult. It's very difficult, but it took him almost 7 years to complete this, and his daughter did all this writing work, and you have a great piece of work before your hand. So as I told you, a critic states that the style is more Latin than English. An English critic, a Western critic, says that in Paradise Lost, John Milton has adopted the Latin, Greek style than English style. He follows, as I told you, he was very much influenced by Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. That is the reason why he follows the same style, same format, same kind of grand epic picture he gives, like Homer. So 1 minute. Yes. The first question, as I told you, is the important question is consider Paradise Lost, or discuss Paradise Lost as again as an epic, or consider the epic details, means discuss the epic details discuss the epic details of again epic details sorry epic features in Paradise Lost. What are the epic features that you see in Paradise Lost that is entitled it to be called as a Paradise Lost, sorry, as an epic? Bring out the features of Paradise Lost which entitles it which entitles it to be called an epic. The second question is bring out the heroic qualities or discuss the heroic qualities, comment on the heroic qualities of Satan in book 1. This is the most probable question. The first probable question is think again discuss the epic features or the epic qualities in Paradise Lost. Second one is comment on the heroic qualities of Satan in Book 1 Paradise Lost. And the third question is does Satan attain heroic dimensions? Does does Satan attain heroic dimensions in Book 1 of Paradise Lost? The answer should be yes. Yes, he attains the heroic dimensions. As I told you, Milton's intention was to create a character who can match God, who is equivalent to God. That is the reason why Milton concentrates much or more in giving the minute details of Satan, his qualities, his leadership qualities, his grand image, his huge body, the kind of fear the other angels has got for Satan. See, it doesn't take it is not of a lesser power to challenge God. A man with greater quality, who has got a greater strength, who has got a greater courageous, enthusiastic spirit. Only such character can match God, isn't it? If you want to match God, you cannot be of a lesser power. You cannot be of a lesser stature. That is the reason why Milton concentrates much, much on Satan, the character Satan, from book 1 to book 4. In book 1, from book 1, 2, 3, 4, in all these 4 books, you can see Milton's concentration is more on Satan's image and Satan's stature than God or man. That is the reason why, as a reader, you fall in love with Satan. Though he is the king of hell, you fall in love with Satan. And the fourth question is, in writing Paradise Lost, Milton was of the devil's party. Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it. It's a famous definition. Quotation by William Blake. William Blake is considered as one of the greatest romantic poet, okay, who has written a poem called The Tiger, Chimney Sweeper. You might have read the poem The Chimney Sweeper, The Tiger. William Blake says, in writing Paradise Lost, Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it. While writing Paradise Lost, but to be honest, only till book 4, Milton's concentration lies on Satan. Only till book 4, not up to book 4. So he gives him the grand stature. So comment on keeping book 1 in view. So in book 1, so Milton's focus is much on Satan. So in writing Paradise Lost, Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it. Full stop. Discuss or comment, keeping book 1 in mind. Okay, that means those are the important questions that you should keep in mind. Keep these questions in mind. Read this particular text, particularly book 1, keeping these 4 questions in mind, and you can at the same time. There is another important question called temptation. See, where Satan tempts Eve, but it appears in book 4. But in book 1, your reading should always focus on Satan and his qualities and his leadership qualities. At the same time, book 1 also speaks about epic qualities. In book 1, you can think about the epic qualities of Paradise Lost. What are the qualities or the features that Paradise Lost has got, which entitles it to be called as an epic, which entitles it to be called as an epic? That's a more important question. That's the important question on epic. And the second important question is heroic qualities of Satan. Heroic qualities of Satan. Okay, to keep these issues in mind, read the text. You will certainly enjoy it. I hope I have given justice for this particular text in these two sessions. Morning, I was not able to complete the class because hardly I got 14 minutes to give a brief introduction about the author, about the epic features and epic qualities, which the main or the major epics of the world literature. The major epics of world literature, as I told you, Ramayana, Mahabharata. When it comes to Sanskrit Indian literature, you have Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and you have Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno is another epic. Okay, is another famous epic, and thank you, and meet you again once again tomorrow in the morning session. I'll be dealing with one more important text, that is Julius Caesar from paper 2, that is Shakespeare. Uh, I hope I was able to give you the justice in a nutshell, at least in a nutshell. Like, see, we cannot like this kind of teaching is new to us. I always love to teach in offline mode, but still, since there is this pandemic issue and we have to abide with this, I expect you to attend all the classes, enjoy all the sessions. Okay, if you have any doubt or any clarifications to make or doubts to clear, my number is very much there in the website. Okay, you can take down my number. If you have any doubt regarding this particular text, you can ask me later on. Okay, I'll move on to the next text, new text tomorrow. So tomorrow at 10 a.m. I have your class. So till then, have a good day. Take care.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. In this class, in this session, I'm going to talk about poetry, especially with special reference to Robert Browning poetry, Victorian era. And as you all know, poetry is a different, what kind of is a important genre in literature, in all sorts of literature. Especially, I'm talking about Victorian poetry. Uh, this Victorian era is also very important, and in this particular era or in this period, we could have a very creamy layer of very important poetry came up, and we have a very strong poets who contributed much in this particular era. And you should be thorough with all these things. And let me start with the definition of poetry. And what do you mean by poetry? And poetry, as I have already mentioned, it's an important genre in literature which evokes a concentrated imaginative awareness of experience or a specific emotional response through language chosen and arranged for its meaning, sound, and rhythm. And you know, there is a lot of difference between a prosaic language and poetry language, right? And what looking into the rhythm pattern or sound pattern only you could recognize what is poetry and what is prose. Poetry is a vast subject, as we all know, as old as history and older. Present wherever, especially the religion is present, or some epic is okay, if present, possibly under some definitions, the primal and primary form of language themselves can categorize poetry. In the present, especially in this session, which talks, I am going to talk about poetry and forms of poetry. And overview of my session or my lecture goes on like this: a definition of poetry. We'll start with the definition of poetry, then move on to the forms of poetry, and then Victorian era. Then later we move on to Robert Browning's poetry, which is prescribed for your study. And as I have already mentioned, poetry is a vast subject and it's a vast broad area of research, and most of the research have been done in this particular field. And you all know it is quite difficult to explore this genre, but still, once you start enjoying it naturally, not every tradition nor every local or individual variation can be or need not be included, but uh, in order to illustrate with examples of some poetry, or by taking the greatest quotes made by the greatest poets, it would be very easy for you to understand what poetry means and what are the types of, especially forms of various forms of poetry. And let me talk about and poetry and how especially poetry differs from other genre of literature. Okay. And this especially genre considers the difficulty or impossibility of defining the lifestyle, and sometimes some people or some poets, they are under the view of, or under the notion of, it's very difficult to define poetry, and poetry is life, life is poetry, like that. And man's nevertheless familiar acquaintance with it, as I have already told you, it has a very a long history, or a what like that. So man's nevertheless familiar acquaintance with poetic genre, and how it is the difference between the poetry and prose, the idea of form of poetry and poetry as a mode of thought, and what especially a little poem, a poem or a small poem can make a difference between the poetry and prose. And what are the forms of poetry? You know, most of you are familiar with the forms of poetry, and this form, poetic form, can be understood as the physical structure of the poem. Hope you're all following me. The length of lines, their rhythms, their system of rhymes and repetition, and what I can say, rhythmic pattern, stanza, or the structure of the poem. Especially, we are giving, while considering the forms of poetry, or while dividing or make a difference between a poetry. In poetry, we can give reference to the physical structure of the poem. And based on that physical structure of the poem, one can divide or one can identify what form of a poetry this is. And the length of lines, their rhymes, rhythms, and the system of repetition. Like in this sense, it is normally reserved for the type of poem where these features have been shaped into a pattern, especially a familiar pattern. And you may be thorough with the form of sonnet, right? The sonnet form. And there are two types of sonnet form. One is Shakespearean sonnet form and Italian sonnet form. Sonnet, what do you mean by a sonnet? Sonnet is a 14-line poem. Okay, it is a poem of 14 lines that is popular from late Middle Ages. I think by the 14th century and the Italian Renaissance, the poem had further made well defined under the pen of Petrarch. Okay, Italian sonnet can also be considered as a Petrarchan sonnet. Especially his sonnets, means Petrarch, whose sonnets were translated in the 16th century by Sir Thomas Watt, who is credited with introducing the sonnet form into English literature. A traditional Italian or Petrarchan sonnet follows the rhyme scheme of ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE. See, its pattern is lines are same, structure is same, but the pattern is it differs. Even Shakespeare in Shakespearean sonnet has also 14 lines, and even Petrarch, but the different with a different pattern. And for example, John Milton's On His Blindness. Okay, the English or Shakespearean sonnet follows the rhyme scheme of ABAB, CD, EF, GG. For instance, William Shakespeare's Time and Moon. Almost all Shakespearean poems, especially sonnets, are what figure under Shakespearean sonnet. Milton, if you want to, if you ask me to give example, best example for Petrarchan sonnet, Milton uses in his poem On His Blindness. Okay, the first form of poetry is sonnet. The second form of poetry is lyric. Maybe most of you are familiar with all these forms. lyric. It is a form of poetry that is subject of being sung to the accompaniment of a musical instrument. So lyric means musical, like melodious, or that expresses intense personal emotions in a manner suggestive of a song. This type of poetry expresses the thoughts and feelings of the poet, especially. And example for lyric is even we can have Robert Herrick poems and Edgar Allan Poe's Annabella Lee. Okay, that can be a best example for lyric. Edgar Allan Poe's, okay, very well known poet, Annabella Lee. This is the best example for lyric form. Then what do you mean by ode? Maybe familiar with odes, right? Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on a Creation, Keats and Shelley, both of them they use ode forms. Ode comes from the Greek term meaning which means to sing or chant. Okay, and belong the both form belongs to the long and varied tradition of lyrical poetry. Originally, it was accompanied by music and dance, and later reserved by the romantic poets to convey their strongest sentiments. What do you mean by how many romantic poets are there in English literature? And it is your work to explore it. Okay, romantic poets especially they had considered or reserved this form to express their deepest and strongest sentiments through their poetry. And it can be generalized as a formal address to an event, a person, or a thing, or which are not present. For instance, William Wordsworth ode on intimations of immortality from recollection of early childhood, or as I have already told you, ode on a Krishna, ode to a nightingale, okay, ode to the west wind. These are the best examples for ode form. Next, let us move on to the important form of poetry, elegy. What do you mean by elegy? An elegy, this is a very, what I can say, distinct poetic form, which means which meant to be sung at a time of a funeral, and which can also be considered as a funeral song. And it can be thought of as a melancholy poem, which is written to mourn the death of someone. Okay, elegy. You know, elegy. Lycidas is a elegy. There are many, and even Grace elegy. Okay, best example, which are known as or considered as a funeral songs, which has melancholy in its tone. And the first elegies were written in Roman and Greek. Okay, earlier elegies were written in Roman and Greek. Then later they started writing in English. Examples for this elegy: Thomas Gray's elegy written in a country churchyard. Next, next form is idyll form. And idyll means it's a short poem, descriptive or rustic line, okay, which used to describe a rural life or a rustic life, written in the style of Theocritus' short pastoral poem, the Idylls. For instance, especially Tennyson's, he uses in one of his poems, Idylls of the King. Okay, Idylls, it is a short one. And later, the very important form of poetry, that is epic. And epic means it is a long, often book length sometimes, okay, narrative in verse form that retells the heroic journey of a single person or group of persons. For instance, even Ramayana, Mahabharata can also be considered as epic, and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, right? These are the best examples for epic. Hope you get it. Take it. Epic means a long poem which tells us the heroic journey of a single person or a group of persons. Then, ballad. Important form is ballad, and it is a form of verse, often a narrative set to music. Ballad, you know, okay, it is a form of verse, often a narrative. It is somewhat like what which used to narrate bedtime stories like that, which has a somewhat in a kind of fable, which ends with a moral of message or a values like that. So it is a form of verse, often a narrative in form, set to music. Etymologically speaking, the word ballad has been taken from Latin word ballare. Okay, ballare, which means a dancing song. You don't know ballad, so which means a dancing song. And Epigram, he is a important what I can say, critic, poet, lyricist, and he has explained the definition of ballad as a poem meant for singing, quite impersonal in material, probably connected in its origins with a communal dance, but submitted to a process of oral traditions among people who are free from literary influences and fairly homogeneous in character. Example for this will be John Keats' La Belle Dame Sans Mercy. Okay, this is the best example for ballad written by whom? John Keats, La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, the title of the poem. Then, important, last but not the least, epigram. There are many forms of poetry, but I am concentrating on the major forms of poetry. Epigram. It is a very short poem, usually 2 or 4 lines long. Okay, epigram, with a simple rhyme scheme. Very short poem which has 2 or 4 lines with a simple rhyme scheme. The goal of an epigram is to encapsulate a brief bit of wit or wisdom in poetic form. For instance, Alexander Pope's epigram, I am His Highness dog at Q. Pray tell me, sir, whose dog are you? Okay, this is just 2 lines. This can be called as epigram. Okay, let us move on to the famous quotations made by the greatest poets on poetry. Let me start with William Wordsworth. And how does he define poetry? And he defined poetry as poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. Okay, and according to Wordsworth, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Then T.S. Eliot, well-known critic, poet, dramatist, and even theorist, he is considered poetry, or according to him, poetry means, he says, a good poet is someone who manages. Okay, how beautifully he says, a good poet is someone who manages, in a lifetime of standing out in thunderstorms, to be struck by lightning 5 or 6 times, a dozen or 2 dozen times, and he is great. And he also says, immature poets imitate, mature poets steal. Okay. And what he says, a good poet is someone who manages in a lifetime of standing out in thunderstorms to be struck by lightning 5 or 6 times, which means to be a poet is a highly risky and difficult job. Like that. Next, Philip Larkin, a well-known poet. He says, deprivation is for me what daffodils were for Wordsworth. Okay, he says like that. Then Shelley. Shelley says, poetry is the record of the best and happiest moments of the happiest and best minds. Got it? Shelley says, poetry, it is the record of the best and happiest moments of the happiest and best minds. Then Robert Frost, well-known poet again, he says writing three words is like playing tennis with the net down. Free verse means no hard and fast rules exist in writing poetry. Actually, I told you know every poetic form has its own structure and its own style of writing. But if I say some poetry is in free verse, which means there is no technicality, just it's a overflow of spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So Robert Frost says to write in a free verse style poetry, it is like a playing tennis with a net down, with keeping your net down. Then, um, again, T.S. Eliot, in one of his famous, well-known essay, Tradition and Individual Talent, there he describes poetry like this. Poetry is not a turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. And it is not the expression of personality, but an escape from personality. But of course, only those who have personality and emotions know what it means to want to escape from these things. Got it? What does he try to say? He means that poetry should not always surround around emotion, but poetry should escape from emotion, and it should not be the expression of the personality of the poet himself, but there should be an escape from personality, which means it should not be biographical always. Okay, autobiographical, and it should escape from the personality. But of course, he says only those who have personality as well as emotions, they only understand what I mean. Like that, he says. Then, S.T. Coleridge, in his words, poetry, how does he define? I wish our clever young poets would remember my homely definitions of prose and poetry. That is prose, words in their best order. Poetry, the best words in the best order. He says that always poetry, he always keeps poetry at a higher level. Okay, he says that poetry always uh, it is the compilation of best words and of a best order in a best order, like that. Then another well-known Victorian poet, Matthew Arnold, and he says poetry is simply the most beautiful, impressive, and widely effective mode of saying things, and hence it is important. So, according to Arnold, who is Arnold? Matthew Arnold, according to him, poetry is simply the most beautiful, impressive, and widely effective mode of saying things, and hence it is very important, according to him, to study poetry, to write poetry, to critic poetry. Okay, yeah, and Blake simply he says in a very easy manner or in a very simple manner, poetry fetters the human race. Okay, William Blake says poetry fetters the human race. And there are many, I can say so many quotations I can quote now. Like again, Arnold said, poetry is at bottom a criticism of life. According to him, poetry is a criticism of life. And Emily Dickinson, a well-known American poet, she says that if I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. Okay, what she says, if I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. And like other Cervantes, and he says, modesty is a virtue not often found among poets. Modesty is a virtue not often found among poets, for almost every one of them thinks himself the greatest in the world. Okay, let me move on to the background, or just wish to give you a background regarding Victorian poetry. I hope so far you are all thorough with definition of poetry and forms of poetry and famous quotations of poetry by greatest poets. Okay, let me talk about Victorian poetry with a bit background. Matthew Arnold, as we all know, he is a well-known, well-established Victorian poet. Once he wrote that poetry is at bottom a criticism of life. Just now I mentioned, and which is an enterprise of the utmost artistic and moral stakes. And as we all know, that Victorian era, especially in this period, we could have a maximum number of a very creamy layer of poetry came up. And when we remember that Victorian literature, we might think immediately of the three-volume novels of Bronte sisters, Charles Dickens, the extravagant comedy of Oscar Wilde and Gilbert and Sullivan, and the unforgettable fictional characters like Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, and so on. And at the same time, in the 19th century Britain, poetry was as prestigious as ever, right? Though novels were rocking and dramas were making sound at that particular point of time, at the same time, even poetry was also considered as a prestigious as ever, and we should thank to advances in literacy and publishing of that time. Poetry had never been read by a wider audience because, as I have already told you, that it is quite difficult to understand, but still it was considered as the prestigious ever. And Victorian's poetry most distinctive qualities can be or may stem paradoxically from its proximity to other genre or forms. Okay, the genre means you know the different things, forms, theater, fiction, music, and art. All of them poetry's competitors in a fully stocked cultural marketplace, and especially in the 1833 essay which was published in What is Poetry, the philosopher John Stuart Mill, responded with terms pilfered from drama. Poetry is feeling, confessing itself to itself in moments of solitude. All poetry is of the nature of soliloquy. You know the meaning of soliloquy? Who uses this particular term? Shakespeare in his plays, right? So, in 1833, essay written by John Stuart Mill under the title What is Poetry? He himself answers, poetry is feeling, confessing itself to itself in moments of solitude. All poetry is of the nature of soliloquy. Soliloquy means one who speaks himself. Poetry is nothing but your own words, feelings, and experiences, like that, thoughts and feelings. In the era's most heralded poetic innovation, Alfred Lord Tennyson, Browning, okay, they all came up, they all belong to this particular era, Victorian era. They created such a fictional, wonderful historical characters and addresses a silent audience without any narrative framing or guidance. Very important characters in this era: Matthew Arnold, Tennyson, Browning. Got it? And visually minded poets were also there in that particular era, including the poet painter Dante, Gabriel Rossetti, and the writer designer William Morris, both associated with the pre Raphaelite Brotherhood. They were considered as a pre Raphaelite poets, who were Rossetti and Morris. Okay, they were considered as pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, pushed poetry toward the picturesque, relishing pictorial detail and painterly embellishment. Tennyson, Algernon, Charles Swinburne, Hopkins they all wrote lyrically lush poems. Lush poems was filled with thoughts and feelings, strongest thoughts and feelings that aspired towards music, okay, and delighting in mesmerizing meters such as Hopkins' invention sprung with rhythm. These sort of questions can be maybe asked in your UGC NET exams or KSET exams like that. You should be thorough with all these literary terms. So please, all of you remember these terms. Hopkins' invention sprung rhythm and virtuous braids of alliteration and rhyme. And when Victorian poets look back into literary history, they uncovered roles fit for dramatic reenactment in myth, Arthurian legend, and the plays of William Shakespeare. In some way, they started picking the themes by looking back, okay, which means from their past great writers of the past, they just wanted to take out the themes and wanted to make it as a central theme of their poetry. And they peered up close at the inspired words of British Romanticism, their immediate predecessors. Because after Romantics, we have Victorians. So their immediate predecessors were Romantics. So whose radical fervor and imaginative boundlessness they were too sorely skeptical to recreate. When poets looked forward, they saw a depersonalized future in which, in the words of Tennyson's Locksley Hall, the individual withers and the world is more and more. That expanding, stippling world saw innumerable advances in the natural and social sciences. So, Victorian we all know Victorian age or era was more advanced, well advanced, technically, spiritually, everywhere, scientific oriented, we can say. So they wanted to bring change even in the art field, poetic field, writing field, literature field, like that. So none were more earth-shaking than evolution or Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection, and introduced in their landmark book on the origin of species and applied to human evolution in the Descent of Man, which was published in 1871. So these were the important books or poets or thinkers or what I can say, musicians, artists. They all came up. Uh, they all started rocking in Victorian era. So it is very important for you to know the background of the Victorian era, the situation, what was prevailing in those context, in that context. Yeah. Then, if one reaction to that apparently senseless world was the world weariness of Tennyson and Arnold and later Thomas Hardy, another was the redoubling of a newly urgent religious poetry. Hopkins, riveting spontaneity. Still, another reaction was an embrace of senselessness in the nonsense poetry. Okay, they say poetry of Edward Lear and Lewis Carroll. So there are many things, especially this period of tremendous change, and that's what drastic change I can say. This period of okay, yeah. Hope you're all following me. If you have any doubts, you can just drop me a message. Okay, yeah. Let me continue with that. This period of tremendous change at home was also the peak of England's so-called imperial century, accelerated by the second industrial revolution and the transformative technologies of the steamship, telegraph, and the British Empire embarked on a period of unrivaled naval and military expansion, colonization, and competition and global trade. We all know. By the end of Victorian reign or era, the empire encompassed territories on every continent but Antarctica. As we all know, British colonized almost across the globe and almost all the countries or land on the earth except Antarctica. And living up to its hyperbole epithet, the empire on which the sun never set. Okay, the empire on which the sun never set. This is the famous statement or a quotation. Britain's imperial reach affected Victorian poets of all styles and subjects. Their poems responded to headline news explicitly. Tennyson's uh, the charge of the Light Brigade, or translated into allegory, Christina Rossetti's Goblin Market. These are all, and even Rudyard Kipling's The White Man's Burden. See, they are all, though they were poets, they were all criticized the existing system, society, rule, everything in their writings. And others answered mounting desires for exotica and eastern themes, such as Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, Edward Scissorhands translation of portraits by the 11th and 12th century Persian astronomer and poet. And even we could also have Emily Bronte here, published under the pen name Ellis Bell, and the collaborative pair of Catherine Bradley and her niece Edith Cooper, writing together under the name Michael Field. So, to early 20th century modernists who defined their art in opposition, and even to contemporary readers, the adjective Victorian can connote prudishness, moralizing, or outmoded conventionality. But late Victorian poetry looks forward to modernisms or modernist encouragement and extremes, with its fixation on moral or cultural or spiritual decadence, transgressions of norms and around like identity, sexuality, and esteem for the artistic values of difficulty and compression. Okay, and the famous theory like arts for art's sake, an English translation of the French motto I art for I art. Okay, art for art's sake. This is a famous motto of the 19th century, which has been extracted from French motto, okay, crystallized the late 19th century doctrine of aestheticism, which swerves away from nihilistic despair over life's meaninglessness by wagering everything on the meaning made within art. So, aestheticism, most eloquent proponent was the critic Walter Pater. Walter Pater, you also please be thorough with, I think, more than 10 names I have uttered, the important personalities of this Victorian era. He says, Walter Pater, he says, to burn always with this heart, gem like flame, to maintain his ecstasy is success in life. So he concludes in studies in the history of the Renaissance, which was written in 1873. We have an interval, and then our place knows us no more. Okay, he says we have an interval, but then our place knows us no more. So our one chance lies in expanding that interval, in getting as many pulsations as possible into the given time. So he has given a alarming call to all the public or to all his contemporaries belong to his age. And as I have already told you that the many poets like Oscar Wilde, Hopkins, Arnold, um, they all belong to Victorian era, and many poems, many novels, classic novels came up in this era, which belonged to the early 20s. Okay, and even 20, which also gives inspiration to 20th and 21st century readers, poets, and critics. And let me move on to Robert Browning. Robert Browning, I told you that he is a major English poet of the Victorian age, noted for his mastery of dramatic monologue. He is known for his style of writing poems, and what was the form he used to use? Dramatic monologue and psychological portraiture. And dramatic monologue means what? Dramatic means in a dramatic manner. Mono means single speaker. So in his poems, we have a single speaker who is to narrate as a poem in a dramatic manner. So he followed the form of dramatic monologue. All his poetry were what poems were written in in the form of dramatic monologue. And regarding his background, I don't want to talk about his autobiographical details. Let me move on to his what I can say, works. Okay, Browning's first work was Falling, a fragment of a confession, which was published in 1833 and anonymously. He didn't try to mention his name. Although formerly a dramatic monologue embodied many of his adolescent passions and anxieties, somewhere it got clicked. Although it received some favorable comment, it was attacked by John Stuart Mill, who condemned the poet's exposure and exploitation of his own emotions and his intense and morbid self-consciousness. But still, encouraged by the actor Charles Macready, Browning devoted his main energies for some years to verse drama, a form that he had already adopted for Stafford when he had been to Stratford College in 1837. Between 1841 and 46, in a series of pamphlets under the general title of Bells and Pomegranates. Okay, what was the nickname he used to write? Under the title of Bells and Pomegranates, especially, he started writing a series. Okay, pamphlets especially. He published seven more plays in verse, including Pippa Passes, 1841, published in A Blot in the Scutcheon, produced in 1843, and Luria, 1846. These and all his earlier works, except Stafford, were printed at his family's expense. Got it? Because those were the days very difficult to get a sponsor or publisher. Although Browning enjoyed writing for the stage, he was not successful in the theatre. Okay, he wanted to be a dramatist and he wanted to be a theatre artist, but he was not at all successful. Since his strength lay in depicting, as he had himself observed, of Stratford, action in character rather than character in action. Okay, he had himself knows that he has to be action in character rather than character in action. And by 1845, the first phase of Browning's life was near its end. In that year, he met Elizabeth Barrett Browning. In her poems, Barrett had included lines praising Browning, who wrote to thank her. In May, they met and soon discovered their love for each other. Then he married Elizabeth Barrett. Okay, even she is also a poetess. And Browning produced comparatively little poetry during his married life, apart from a collection of poetry edited in 1849. He published only Christmas Eve and Easter Day in 1850. And like this, his poetic life. Then, in 1855, he published a collection of 51 poems under the title Men and Women. Okay, then dramatic lyrics such as Memorabilia, Love Among the Dunes, and Toccata of Galuppi, and Fra Lippo, and these are all written by himself. And his first task on his return was to prepare his wife's last poem for the press. Even he was not very selfish and self-centered poet. Instead, he wanted to encourage his wife to produce poetry or write poetry. And the most important works of his last years, when he wrote with great fluency, were the long narrative or dramatic poems, often dealing with contemporary things such as Prince Pastel, like that. There are many important notable work like My Last Duchess, Pippa Passes, Rabi Benzazro, and The Ring and the Book, and The Last Ride Together, and even what's that? Prospice. Okay, legacy of as we all know that a few poets have suffered more than Browning from hostile incomprehension or misplaced admiration, both arising very often from a failure to recognize the predominantly dramatic nature of his work. And as we all know, it was not a bed of roses for the poets those belong to earlier period like the Romantics or maybe Victorian. It was very difficult for them to survive in their field, and all of them they had to see the rise and fall in their life, and including Browning. So both arising many poets they had to arise from the failure to recognize the predominantly dramatic nature of their. Yes, this continues and this consists essentially of a narrative spoken by a single character and amplified by his comments on the story. And later, these all things uh, led or paved the way to discover his own, what I can say, form of writing poetry. What is that? Dramatic monologue. And let me start with one of his well-known poem, My Last Duchess. This is a poem of 56 lines. It is in a rhyming couplet by Robert Browning, and which is also written in the form of a dramatic monologue. It was published in 1842 in Dramatic Lyrics, a volume in his Bells and Pomegranate series. I told this. He started writing the complex under the title Bells and Pomegranates, and this poem it consisted or it is in the series called Bells and Pomegranate series, which was published in 1842. And it is one of Browning's most successful dramatic monologues. And the poem's narrator here, as I have told you, dramatic monologue, you have a single speaker, right, addressing the reader or the visitor in the poem. The poem's narrator is a Duke of Ferrara. Got it? Hope you're all following me. The poem's narrator is the Duke of Ferrara, who comments dispassionately on the portrait of his late wife hanging on the wall, remarking on the Duchess' innocence and character. Here, Ferrara is explaining and praising the beauty and innocence of King the Duchess, and he reveals that the Duchess had incurred his displeasure by her expansive friendliness and her refusal to acknowledge his superiority in all things. So it becomes apparent at last that he himself brought about her death. And he openly says, and this poem, as I have told you, that this is a dramatic monologue written by Victorian poet Browning, in which year? In 1842. The Duke, how he speaks about his former wife's perceived inadequacies to a representative of the family of his bride to be. Okay, who is he is narrating this story to a representative. One representative had come from the family of his wife to be, okay, bride to be, revealing his obsession with the controlling others in the process. Browning uses this compelling psychological portrait of a despicable character to critique the objectification of women and abuses of power. So here he wants to send a message like how he want to have a control over others, women, and even how to abuse his power. Okay, the poem runs like this. The poem begins with, "That's my last duchess, painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive." Okay, this is how the poet starts. I just read a few lines. "I call that piece a wonder. Now, Fra Pandolf's hands work busily a day, and there she stands." Okay, this Fra Pandolf, he was a painter of that painting. Okay, the painting of whom? The Last Duchess, which means that she is already dead. And let me give you a summary of this poem in a nutshell. My Last Duchess, this poem where we have a Duke of Ferrara who is the speaker. The Duke of Ferrara directs the attention of a guest to a painting of his former wife, the Duchess of Ferrara, which hangs on the wall. The Duke praises the painting for looking so lifelike and then remarks on how hard the painter Fra Pandolf worked hard on it. The Duke asks the guest to sit and look at the work. The Duke then explains that he deliberately mentioned the name of a painter because strangers like the emissary always look at the Duchess' painted face with its deep, passionate, and earnest glance and turn to the Duke, and only Duke, since only he pulls back the curtain that reveals the painting, and act as though they would ask if they dared. How can how can we expect him to what expect the visitor to ask? And here, just he wanted to know what kind of expression which came into her face. Okay, the Duke reiterates that the guest is not the first person to ask this question. And the Duke continues by saying that it was not only his presence that brought that look into the painted eyes of a duchess or the blush of happiness into her painted cheek. He suggests that perhaps Fra Pandolfo had happened to compliment her by saying her shawl drapes over her wrist too much, like that. Or paint could never recreate the faint half blush that's fading on her throat. The Duke insists that the former duchess thought that polite comments like those were reason enough to blush and criticizes her in a halting way for being too easily made happy or impressed. See, by narrating all these things, somewhere we could find in the Duke Ferrara that he may be fishy about his wife, and he may be always doubtful, right? Always suspicious about his wife. That's why he says no. See, he also claimed that she liked everything and everyone she saw. See what a damaging statement he says. And although his description suggests that she was ogling everyone who crossed her path, he is commenting and criticizing his last wife. The Duke objects that to his sorry, to his former duchess, everything was the same and made her equally happy, whether it was a fruit or present from him that she wore at her chest, the sun setting in the west, a branch of cherries which some interfering person snapped off a tree in the orchard for her, or the white mule she rode on around the terrace. He claims that she would say the same kind words or give the same blush in response to all of them. See, somewhere we could find that after listening to his talk or listening to his words, we could feel that he may be criticizing or he may be praising. We all it's in a dilemma. But If you start reading between the lines, then you could easily understand that, of course, he is commenting, right? He is criticizing the attitude of his own wife. The Duke also objects to her manner of thanking men, although he struggles to describe his concerns. Specifically, he complains that she values his pedigree and social position, especially his 900-year-old name, as equally important to anyone else give to her. Got it? The Duke rhetorically asks whether anyone would actually lower themselves enough to argue with someone about their name. The Duke imagines a hypothetical situation in which he would confront the former Duchess. He says that even if he were good with words and were able to clearly say, "This characteristic of yours disgusts me," or "Here you did too little or too much." And if the former Duchess had let herself be degraded by changing instead of being stubborn and making excuses, that even then the act of confronting her would be beneath him. And he refuses to always ever lower himself like that. So finally, the Duke then returns to his earlier refrain about his father's wife indiscriminate happiness and complains to his guest that while the Duchess did smile at him whenever they passed, she gave everyone else the same smile as well. As I told you, know, the Duke ends his speech by demanding that he and Count's emissary go downstairs together, and on their way, he directs the emissary's attention to a statue of the god Neptune taming a seahorse, which is a rare work of art that Clause of Innsbruck cast in bronze specifically for him. So, what are the main or major themes of this poem? Just I'll tell you the major themes of the poem is to begin with the objectification of women. Of course, he's looking at his wife and he's considering his wife as an object. And he complains, no, he goes on complaining that she talks to everyone and she gives the same look to everyone. She's made the same smile to everyone and she always talks to everyone like that. And my last ditches, okay, is as I told you that it is a dramatic monologue and it is quite important, uh, in which the Duke Ferrara tells us that messenger of his potential wife's family about his previous one. The last riches of the poem, the title itself, tells us that everything. Maybe he may be praising, but when we go through the poem, then we know what kind of a suspicious nature the Duke has, and why did he himself agrees. No, he himself what what murders his own wife, and the Duke's treatment of the painting, everything. This is made even clearer by the fact that the Duke has placed his painting in a public area of his palace so that he can proudly display it to guests. So he is looking at her in a form of an object. And another important theme is that social status, art, and elitism. Okay, social status, and because throughout the poem we could have he himself praises, he boasts of himself, and he blows his own trumpet that he is the king and he is the duke, and he has to. He says no, he wants to have control over others, and so he wanted to what keep his wife in his clutches. Even he wanted to have a control over her feelings. So it is quite impossible as well. No? So the Duke repeatedly reminds the messenger of the power in his title. He does this in part by mentioning the famous artists like Fra Pandolf or Claus of Innsbruck, because he doesn't want to what tell their names like that, just but he wanted to rank them, okay, like that along with their names. So another important thing is that control and manipulation, okay, closely tied to the Duke's repeated emphasis on his social status and his objectification of women, which is also clearly shows that desire for his desire for control, right? That why he wanted to manipulate is controlled by treating women as objects to be possessed, the Duke can more readily dominate them. Similarly, by drawing attention to his title and social clout. And he always quite often uses his social status indicated by his ancient name and opulent artwork like that. And most ancient viewing believe that there is nothing improvisatory about the Duke's verse, even when he trips over them. And he comments that strangers who have seen the painting have asked him about the farmer's duchess expression, and that the messenger is not the first to inquire about it. So, hope you all have understood, and I made myself clear by having the Duke deliver the dramatic monologue to the emissary, address throughout the poem as you. Okay, in the throughout the poem, he uses the term you for to address emissary. Browning forces his readers to experience the Duke's manipulation to better understand how abuse of power operates. This form of address can encourage readers to imagine how they themselves would respond in such a situation. And another very important, what I can say, poem written by Browning is Prospice. Okay, the Prospice, it's a French title of the French term, which means like just let me conclude this poem in a nutshell form. This is also very important, as I have already clearly given you a brief introduction and regarding his style of writing and the tone, the form of writing, everything. So in this poem, the speaker asks himself, uh, what is to like to fear death? Why should I fear death like that? Okay, he begins by describing the oppressive imagery of it like fog in my throat, the press of the storm, the post of the foe. So, despite the deterrence, the strong man must go, and he insists that he will push forward on his journey no matter the end. As he has always been a fighter, he says he refuses to creep past death. So he says that he himself declares that he is the strongest man and he is the fighter because throughout his life he has been fighting to survive. So he says, I don't creep past death and I don't cry over death and I don't fear death. And we can just imagine or recollect the poem written on the same theme, death. Death is the important major theme of this poem. Like even who has written on this thing? Death be not proud, right? By Donne, like that. So the second half of the poem stresses his resolve to confront death fully until he reveals his true motivation to reunite with the beloved who has died before him. So, this poem is written soon after the death of his wife Elizabeth Barrett Browning in 1861. Okay, Prospice can easily be viewed as one of Browning's most, what I can say, uh, direct declarations, naked declarations. Its basic message is that he, in this case, perhaps not a character, but the poet himself. Okay, throughout this poem, who will be the speaker? Who is the speaker? The poet. It is also written in a dramatic monologue form, and the poet himself will not falter before that, even though its imminence forwards the journey of life, but instead he states that he will march forward heroically and face it. Okay, he says that the death cannot weaken me, but instead I am strong enough to bear the death because my wife is no more dead. She is there in my heart, like that. So, however, one can certainly take license in interpreting the poem more freely. The basic question that opens the poem: fear death. Okay, fear death means do you fear for death like that? Works not only as an impulse for the speaker, but as a challenge to the reader. Right. This is very challenging task to understand whether the poet is really scared of death or in which way he wants to sustain. And the two, he has written this poem after the death of his beloved wife, right? So, just I will read out some important lines here. He does not, especially, he doesn't pretend that death brings nobility to life. Instead, he suggests that the imminence of death makes life into a battle. and that life leads to pain, darkness, and cold. The coward's path to creep past it. And he says that it is a coward job to die or creep or mourn for death, but I am a strong man, strongest man. I don't creep past or I don't mourn. Instead, he says, no, I'll face it strongly because even one day I have to die and I'll go and reunion with my wife like that. Okay, he says at the end of the poem. And it is perhaps most interesting to read this poem in the context of Roland to the Dark Tower came. The latter poem, especially significantly more obtuse and cross-speech, especially even suggests the goal in similarly heroic terms. For the journey is done and the summit attained, and the barriers fall, though a battle is to fight ere the garden be gained. So he says that death means your journey is end. You are done with your journey like that, and you have attained your goal and you have done your job, everything. But the art lies in how valuably or how well you have lived your life when you were alive. So this poem especially it gives two indications that there is honor in life, both of which come from relationship to others, and the speaker refers to persisting in the face of death, so he can pair like peers the heroes of old. So which carries a positive tone of comrade, and he stands as a comrade or a militant, and he knows how to face death, and one should not creep over or creep over the past like that. So prospice, this is intent on earning their respect. And lastly, the final motivation in the poem to reunite with the beloved. I told you, no? And the two he ends this otherwise dark poem with a suggestion that death itself is but a barrier, beyond which true happiness can be regained. Whereas Roland could go no further than the dark tower. The poet of Prospice braves the dark tower with full confidence that there is light beyond it. Okay, the poem, especially Prospice, Latin term, which means look forward. Okay, prospice is a Latin term which means look forward, and this is written in autumn season. I told you that this is a very powerful portrayal of a wife's death. And he says how he knows imagery is also very important in this one. You have to concentrate on, especially how he personifies the death, theme of death, imagery and form. I have already told you that dramatic monologue form he has used in this poem, and personification of death as an enemy to fight, extended metaphor of battle. Okay, he has used excuse all sorts of figures of speech. Okay, then metaphor, personification we have, and how he uses the literary terms. Everything is very important. And only single speaker throughout the poem, dramatic monologue, like Browning as the speaker here, and who is silent listener. This seems like a call to arms for all mankind. And prospice means to look ahead or look forward, a positive take on death. Okay, don't always think in a negative manner. I told you, he tells us that at the end of the poem, he says, "I'm going to reunite with my wife after my death." So he says that you have to think positively, and you have to take a positive side on that and its reverse. The use of Latin suggests that facing death is a timeless issue. So, and what kind of structure is also very important to know that one one stanza, singularity of speaker's mind. He is set on his goal, and the majority of poem alternates trimeter, which means three fate and pentameter. But this is not always consistent and brings us towards the middle part of the poem. And the rhyming scheme is A B A B C D C D like that, and speak a steady movement ahead towards death, which is also very important in this poem. Hope you all uh, understood this poem. And if you have any queries, you can ask me and drop me a message. It's time already, time up. Thank you.